Hey, happy Saturday, everyone. Welcome to my bubble. I have laloo, the unspeakable. Unspeakable is laloo. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm trying to make a transition between the Lolly Laloo name and the
Oh,
just plain unspeakable. So I'm linking them in people's minds. As in unspeakable, which will be the future name, is Lolly Laloo.
oh, I
So
see.
yes, I'm sort of in the interim period right now.
And if you can't tell, I cannot say apparently laloo because I keep calling in my mind the
Which
whole.
which is one of the main reasons I'm changing the name.
So you will be unspeakable, the
Because
speakable.
apparently Lolly Laloo is unspeakable. So yes.
So welcome, and I've for some time enjoyed our interactions, the bits of conversation that I stumble across in different threads and whatnot, and found that you've had very interesting things to say, and you've shared some things with me that I've really appreciated. So I wanted to kind of have you on, and I know there's a couple of other. You've got quite a few fans where you're talking about Helena, kind of nudging, nudging and poking at you, or poking at people to poke at you. So she's quite an instigator, but quite a fan as well. Um, and I wanted to get to know some of your uh, background a little bit more. You seem pretty interesting. So, what? How did I guess? Where did you start?
Where I started, well, as the child of a philosophy professor, um,
Wow.
a logic teacher, um, overly precocious and hard atheist, but at least the family. But I don't know. Active imagination is where I started.
Was
Um,
it a collegiate philosophy professor or?
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
at University of Connecticut, which is where I grew up.
Hmm. New England, a fellow
So,
New Englander.
oh yeah, I'm imported to the South for some reason temporarily, but yeah, I'm a New Englander birthwise, as
Hmm.
wasp as they come, and I don't know, I definitely an academic environment. Um, yes,
So that's interesting. So
but are we talking about where I came? Are we talking about where I came from, like ideologically, belief system wise,
yeah, I
or
guess
just generally?
you said that you mentioned that your family or your environment was atheistic, but you and that your I'm sure your father's philosophy. I don't know. Did he ever bring that? I assume he brought that home at points or around
Oh yeah,
in
definitely,
conversation.
definitely. It wasn't that it just never occurred to me to be religious. It just was not an issue.
Hmm.
My mom likes to sing, so she would be in choirs and stuff, and
Sure.
occasionally she would like cart us along to something or other. Sorry, passing cars. Um, but there were really, it never occurred to me that religion was something that people did
Yeah,
as a
certainly.
serious thing.
I don't know if this was your experience as well, but certainly in New England, I've said this a couple of times that it's a lot easier up there to be to separate your religion from your your life. Essentially, it ends up being
I
more of a
guess.
there's a lot of old Catholic and Protestant churches up in there. It's not like the Bible Belt, right?
Right.
So
I mean,
the
people in my grade school classes would go to CCD,
right.
and I didn't know what that was at all, like at all. But it always seemed to be the popular kids who were getting to get dropped off at CCD
Oh,
altogether. It was only like I was like, what is this club that they all go to?
I didn't
Why
realize
am I not in that club?
I didn't realize I was in the popular club. And for the record, I went to CCD and I don't know what CCD was. So
I finally figured out it was something to do with Catholicism, but it took me a long time. So I don't know. Yeah, it just if anything, if I had
suddenly decided that I believed in God, it would have been a problem.
So for those who don't know that CCD at least in America, I'm not sure if it actually goes out into other nations, but in America and certainly in the Northeast, in the Roman Catholic Church, kids go to school, and then they, on like one day a week, usually I think it was Mondays for me after school, I would go to CCD, and it was essentially like maybe an hour or two of religious teaching that I'd receive as part of my being brought up in the Catholic Church.
Right. I remember. I mean, okay, there were a lot of Catholics where I grew up, and then there was like one or two families that were Baptist, and my little brother, was really good friends with one of the Baptist boys, and he went to church with them this one time, and he was like 7 or something, and because of all the fire and brimstone and like, you need to come down here and be saved, so he did, and my mom was furious with this family for letting that happen. Just, I mean, she was.
Wait, so did he continue to go after that, or was it just a one-time occurrence?
No, he just felt pressured.
That's great. How old was he when that occurred?
He was like 7 years old. You know, I mean, he's like, these people are telling me this, and all these people are doing this. I should probably do that. So.
Yeah, well, for what it's worth, my mom begged for us to have our children baptized in the Catholic Church, even though we weren't at the time. We were going to a Bible church, non-denominational Bible church, and she was convinced that would kind of ensure their salvation.
Cover all your bases.
I hope she never watched this, 'cause I'm pretty sure she won't. Yes, exactly. She wanted us to cover all of our bases, so but we didn't. So she got over it.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with okay, we were atheists. My dad though taught the New Testament as like the historical part. So he he reads Hebrew and Greek. He's one of those. Like, and so I was familiar with the stories, but I saw them and still do see them as I was fascinated by mythology, and I still am. So I played like Greek myths out with my blocks, and I had picture books of the Greek and Egyptian myths and stuff like that, and I just this all kind of melded in to the stories that people tell.
That is
and
fascinating.
It still feels that way to me, and so I don't have.
That's something I mentioned on the last show. It was with John F. That I've noticed this of growing up atheist or growing up believing. The big difference I've seen between the two is whether the kid takes the story to be separate from other stories, from other myths and other kinds of stories, and treats it as real, or if they take it in as all the other myths and stories and treat it as that. It's an interesting line.
I think that's true, and I also think, of course, this is where I come from, but I feel like I don't know. It's because it's my perspective. I feel like it's the healthier way to look at it, but I can't say that because I don't know whether that's correct or not. But it certainly strikes me as tragic. When people limit themselves to one, because they're all beautiful. And that the other thing is that I don't find any resentment against the story itself at all. I don't feel the need to mock it. The story. I don't need to mock the story because I find the story fascinating and beautiful and valuable for their cultural development of humanity. But that I cannot understand people who want to create their picture of reality around it. So
yeah, that's I don't want to get too far off track here, but that resonates with me. In that yesterday or the day before, Preet Wilson was asking about what people thought of Jesus and the Father in terms of, did they see Jesus as being more compassionate, more and she wanted to get feedback from atheists and Christians alike, kind of what their perception is of the presentation, and I had to kind of recall how I thought about my beliefs back 15 years ago, and longer, and how I took it, and I expressed that I saw them as co-suffering, that they're in this loving relationship, that through the death of Christ, that the Father suffered the loss and the separation, and that there was that they were both compassionate and loving. But I said that now, as I think about it, I was trying to express that it's not. It is the story. I appreciate the stories now, and I appreciate the richness of the history of the text, and the intent of the authors. And there are many things that I'm accessing now that before I had flattened out, right? And so I felt like it got richer for me. But I don't mock the story, like you said. It'd be like mocking, a Shakespearean play or something. Like it is of interest to me. It is fascinating, and I actually value the richness it provides, and in going through it and understanding it and understanding what these people are saying. And it's more has to do with the individuals who then take those words and use them. That's the bit that I have more problem with than actually the text itself. I don't have, this thing gnawing at me wanting to deride this text, or to. It's more the abuse of it, or it's not even the abuse, because there was intention there as they wrote it, but I don't have some outstanding resent towards those that did. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes, it does. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. People explain the world to themselves in a lot of ways.
Mm.
I don't think any of them are correct, necessarily. Yeah.
Yeah, that helps. That helps get into. Well, maybe we'll kind of go this way, because this was something I really wanted to talk to you about. Was so probably about 2 or 3 months ago, maybe 2 months ago, you shared with me the Alan Watts The Web of Life lecture that he did. There's a lecture that's entitled Web of Life on YouTube or whatever, but it's Alan Watts, who was an American philosopher. Well, is he British? But he's
English. He was English, but he lived a lot of his life in America.
In Berkeley, right? He was in California, I think.
Yeah, he was a part of that whole Esalen Institute, all those people who discovered Buddhism. But he was one of the first ones to discover Buddhism, and he articulated for Westerners a lot of Eastern thought. I think his major contribution to the whole conversation.
I don't know if you guys watch Mad Men at all, but it reminds me of the last episode of Mad Men. They get involved in the whole all the movement that's going on up in the Northern California. That's that period in history or whatever, as people are getting kind of into Eastern mysticism, a Western form of it, essentially.
Right. Well, he started off as an Anglican minister. He he grew up Anglican, and then in his 20s, I guess, started to really explore that stuff, the other philosophies, and just really opened the door to a lot of alternative, almost other properly basic beliefs. Is the way I put it to myself. Most of them are intact, but some of the ones that are more influenced by our language itself, identity, the quality of consciousness, the definition of how we define our relationship to the universe, is not dictated, but certainly influenced by our speech patterns and the form of our language. I don't know. I know I overshare Alan Watts. It's primarily because I find little to disagree with, for one thing, and he spent decades articulating this stuff, and is a lot better at it than I am.
And Alan
So I'm
Watts,
like, I have something to say, and he said it better than me, so here you go.
Alan Watts is great. Every one of his lectures, I haven't found one that's bored me out or I didn't like.
Yeah,
And you can listen to it a second time and still find something new in what's going on.
Yeah, he's really witty as well, and it's really well put. I'm always finding myself kind of grinning as I'm listening to it, as he kind of explores these things that, and I guess the reason why I brought that up was that there's a richness there that I would actually say that I seek that out because I know I'm bad at doing it. So it's a little like I have such a two-dimensional view of things, or a way of approaching things in such a way of thinking that makes those types of observations a little, not out of reach, but I have to work at that. I have to work at not overthinking, or at maybe thinking on a different level. And it's a little like what you said. It's getting these experiences of other ways to think about things, and letting that kind of letting your own experience kind of be affected by that, by others' experiences, or by other ways of shifting the model and thinking about things differently.
I think one of the keys to opening the door to that being more natural is to not narrate it to yourself, not to try to explain quite so much. I don't know. What I find is that things like physics and biology, looking at physics and biology in their language and applying that to myself, to the way things actually work, because those two sciences agree with this point of view.
Mm-hmm.
But like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this might be a bad way of reading that, but it resonates with what Richard, the History of Evolution, was saying a couple of weeks ago, of finding the intent of the authors in their own words, or not kind of like you said, not narrating it, dropping your own inner voice a bit and letting it speak to you. Trying to let your guard down a little bit.
Well, yeah, and if you, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I meant about the sciences was that the implications of both physics and biology contradict our traditional picture of reality.
Yeah, our intuitions about it. Yeah.
They really, really do. Physics tells us that we are form and we are not matter. Tells us that the actual substance just is not there. It isn't something that it's like the reason I can't put my hand through the table is that it's moving too fast. There's nothing you can glom onto and say. For me, that's fascinating. That the science actually does agree with that.
And that's the part I think catches people up too, because this is why Alan Watts is so great at it. It's hard to speak of what. It's why you're having a hard time even telling it now. It's hard to speak on this stuff without sounding like you're talking about woo.
Yes.
That's one of the main reasons I haven't really opened my mouth about this stuff very much on Hangouts. It's very difficult to say. First of all, it's difficult to say in English. And second of all, it's just difficult to say in general. And then with me, I am, if anything, I'm a harder atheist than I was before the experiences that I had. Because I simply, like, the idea, even the concept of an external force making this world out of something, or of it, that simply does not compute with how things feel to me. So.
Yeah, I think for myself, it's really messing with your you know, we have all these concepts about how things are. Like we conceive the world a certain way based on our intuitions and our experiences. And really what someone like Watts does is it gets me to it shakes up the concept a little bit. So if I took an example, one that really resonated with me I thought was fascinating was to talk about a net as being a collection of string holding together holes, right? Like that a net is actually a collection of holes held together by string. I think that's how he said it, a collection of holes held together by string. And he talks about also about auditory, like hearing music, and that the parts that there's vibrations in the air, and the high peaks and the low peaks, the peaks that would be considered sound and the peaks that aren't, that are modulated, that they're equally important, right, to the concept. And that often we don't see the holes, right? We only see the string. And I feel like that's what I get from here, you know, when I sit and think about this stuff, or I don't think about it quite so much, and I listen to somebody else articulate it that's putting it a little differently. It helps me see the holes, right, and gets me out of just thinking about the string.
Yeah, and I mean I've probably said this a million times, but the spotlight versus the floodlight consciousness, the spotlight is necessary. It's necessary to function as an alive thing. But only having the spotlight, only having the spotlight awareness isn't necessarily going to serve us best either. I think it serves us to see the whole as well. And on the biological front, an organism is not a unit that's separate. Organism environment is the way that it's actually,
right.
It is the ecosystem. The ecosystem is one thing. There's no way to separate it into individual pieces apart from the rest. So I don't know. I'm being unusually inarticulate today, so I felt.
It's not easy stuff to articulate, though, right? I mean, that's the hard part. And
that's the other meaning of my name. Is there are so many layers to meaning. Add as many entendres as you want, and I'm sure they'll all be applied.
No, that's something I like exploring. What you're talking about is the separation between things that our intuitions point us towards and what our senses kind of tell us might not actually be a separation there, or not a separation completely.
Yeah, it's how do you define one thing without something else there to like differentiate. Mm-hmm. You can't. The only way I know where my body ends is by comparing it to where it's not. So I don't know. I guess if I were to categorize that view, it'd be polarity or non-dualism. But it's easier to say what it means by saying it Advaita. I don't know. Non-dual, undivided, but it's also divided, and that makes no sense because I can't articulate this stuff. Right.
Going back to the more the general phenomena, or the without getting into the specifics quite as much, the what I feel like's going on is it helps me in the sense of when I'm working visually in we deal with contrasts a lot in image making. Different relationships of contrast help draw the eye, right? So you have contrast of hue, saturation, or value that you can modulate to try to bring focus. And when I explain this to my daughter, who's an artist, when I was first explaining this to her, I was saying, like, look at that wall over there. And she looked at the wall, and I said, the first thing you look at is the outlet, because the outlet is standing against a plain wall, right? And that was to demonstrate to her that we don't our eyes fixate on it goes. The first read that you have is you go to contrast, and
What stands out?
Then
Yeah.
right, or what stands out, right? There was a great on Ben Caruth's channel, who I got turned on to after I listened to the. He's a YouTuber who doesn't YouTube anymore. He's fantastic.
From that supping with pre-suppers thing. He rocks.
Yes, and his channel he hadn't posted anything in years, but his stuff that's there is excellent. He's got some great found word poetry that he did where he edited the stuff together. It's remarkable. But he has this one great video on. He talks about the skyline that he's outside. I've talked about this before on the bubble, but he talks about that he has this phenomenal view of the skyline. I think he's in the Northwest somewhere, and when they first got the place, or when he first got in there, that he would take it in, and it was remarkable. But then over time, he had to work. He had to actually force himself to appreciate it, because you take it for granted. You notice the new, that your brain is. He talked about how it's prioritizing, and it says, okay, I already know about that. What's new here? What do I have to do? What do I have to look at that I'm not familiar with? But the familiar then loses its luster, essentially, and you can never have that. I'll tell my family, when we're watching a movie, I hate when somebody's speaking or they interrupt it or whatever, because you only get to watch it once for the first time. And so his point was that to stop yourself and try to take back in something, or to see something a different way once you've become used to seeing it a certain way, that we're not very good at doing that. And I feel like a lot of this is that it's learning to not look at the outlet on the wall. It's learning to look at the bare spot and consider all the space that occupies, or to twist. I talk about turning the model. It's like trying to get a different perspective on things, or trying to break how it is you're used to seeing it.
Perspective is the absolute key, because it's all about thinking about our habitual perspective. Definitely, I find that that's a skill. It's a skill to be able to shift your perspective. It's not something that necessarily comes naturally all the time.
Yeah,
and I feel like that's something that I've articulated on here before, that I felt like when I became an atheist, at least initially, my creativity suffered from it as a result. And I think part of that was that I became much more hard and fast, and it's a little bit allergy to woo, or it's an allergy to examining the gaps and letting the gaps sit there, not feeling the need to fill them in, right? Ironically, because it seems like that's what you just got out of, but all of a sudden you want all these hard and firm answers. And a little like what Xbox is saying, these things that are a bit more looking at the unquantifiables, or the things that are difficult to articulate, that are questioning your own perspective on things, you develop, sometimes I feel like we have an allergy to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Questioning perspectives is hard, but good at the same time.
Yeah. How do you shift yourself from thinking about you as the center of it, and then shifting from that without losing the specialness of yourself, right? Because I do there.
Well, the thing is that both are correct and neither are correct. It's that's been one of the key things for me to learn, is that it's not one way or the other. It's both, and it's neither. And it's okay to switch back and forth. You have to. If one lived without any sense of personal identity, one would cease to function. So.
Right.
I, on the other hand, had not an allergy to woo, but a wish for woo from early on in some ways. I wanted those myths to be true, and I wanted the fairy tales to be true in some way. I wished that I could go into the wardrobe and come out in Narnia. More than anything, like I wanted magic to work. I wanted it, and from early on, I played like I got into playing around with paganism and stuff early on because my dad ironically started having a party every year on the solstice and called it the solstice party for his philosophy ironic friends, and with a big giant bonfire where we sacrificed hot dogs and things. But I, of course, wanted that to be true, all of it, and so did things like make costumes for myself and make flower altars, and I don't know. I was like, maybe I can make the magic. Of course, I mean, I wanted to be an elf. Still do, but I once I really did try really hard to find the woo correct, especially after especially during the last 15 years or so. But this past 3 years or so, I've come back to the ground with it. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of us want the magic to be correct. I think we start to find a grounding in what real magic is, right? Not the impossible.
Right. It's less I don't know. I went down a lot of roads trying to find the entrance and had some cool experiences, but I kind of came back home to realize that I had been there the whole time. So.
Right on. You said something, if you don't mind, Bert, you said something a little bit ago about you don't think any of the views are necessarily correct, and I hold a similar stance. I wanted to maybe if you'd tell me your reasons on that.
Well, if we're talking about the religions, then I think it would be absolutely absurd to think that any human could parse it out. I mean, that any human could that if such a deity existed, if we're talking specifically about the Abrahamics, if that kind of thing were true, the idea that any human could accurately portray it is laughable to me.
Right. What do you think on just worldviews in general? Just
worldviews in general. Okay, we'll go to the scientismic side. I think it's equally laughable to think that we can divide it up and calculate it up as so much dead material, and make sense of it that way.
Right. Yeah. I actually agree with you on a lot. I hear a lot of worldviews that match up with reality, and usually those are the ones that get reasonable to believe in, kind of thing, and navigate, and we just use it to navigate. And
yeah.
Other than that, I don't think that any of them are necessarily true. I use the word thought experiment a lot, that they all seem like big thought experiments.
Well, right. It doesn't. I don't think any of them are correct, but I don't think any of them are entirely like. I think you've seen the picture of the people all around the elephant, and it says this is a this, and this is it's a tree, obviously. It's a tube, obviously, and everyone putting their hands on the elephant and saying what it feels like to them, and they're all talking about something, but they only have pieces of it. And I don't see there could be any other way, since we're all in different positions in this whatever the hell it is.
Right.
But yeah, I'm not sure exactly where you want me to go with this. Like,
we don't have to go. We're going there anyway, right?
Okay, yeah, of course. But I can sail. I can put up a sail in my mind and try to take it.
No, what you're saying is good.
Let me see here. I didn't come to. I didn't realize that I wasn't just playing, and that there was. For most of my earlier years until about my late 20s, I guess, I explored, I played, I went to goddess temples, I did this, that, and the other. I studied mythology as cultural phenomenon, and played around with translation of various Celtic things. I was like, Druidism makes sense to me because I like trees, but all of a sudden I had the thing, whatever the hell the thing is, the experience, where I really think that my little babbleness can impact the conversations that goes on in the, quote, great debate, is that I suspect, one of my theories is, or hypotheses is, that the religious experiences that people have, the religious experience that even Jesus may have had, is the same across cultures. And it's the same as what people call satori. It's the same as what people call moksha.
And when you say that, are you talking about, I hear that and I hear you, I would take that to mean that you mean that the experience that they're having, that what they experience.
The inner experience
right.
is, sorry, motorcycle.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay. I'm on my porch, so. I think people put layers of their own experience over top of something that is continuous, but like coeval among cultures.
Like they bring
the experience itself. Because the experience is that I am one with everything, or I am the same as God. I am this, that, and the other. But when people put filters over top of it, of their cultural background or their preconceptions, it comes out colored with different religions.
Yeah, I feel like this is a little bit what I was talking about with what I talked about with Preet, was that the experience I had in that sitting, so I used to go home and I'd during the summers, and I'd sit out in a field in the middle of New Hampshire and read my Bible, and I'd come to tears, right? Like they were things that I were really, really feeling through reading these things and taking in, and they meant things to me, and these things would move me, and it was very impactful, and those were real experiences for me. Now looking back, I don't believe that what they were referring to was actually the case, but it doesn't change that I was having those experiences, and that those were very rich. They were very they were meaningful in that they changed me and they changed how I looked at things. And it's a little bit like when I listen to Alan Watts' lecture. Or I'm driving home last night. I was listening to Physical Graffiti on the way home, and I was like, "Oh my God, this album is so how good it is." And I have these experiences that are very rich and we talk about transcendent experiences, but it's not transcendent to some spiritual plane. It's more that it lifts me out of my ordinary and gets me to look at things differently, or to filter my it colors my experience, or it colors my person, I guess. Does that make sense?
Well, there's two different things that come to mind. One is what I've always called another motorcycle. My goodness, the warm day here.
for the first time in a while. So everybody's out on their motorcycles. What I used to call the truth meter, which it was a physical sensation, is a physical sensation when I hear certain sounds, when I read certain things, when I see certain sights, and get goosebumps and all that good stuff. So that's one thing, which is woo sounding, but nonetheless a real phenomenon. But what I meant by like the religious experiences is more the I've heard people talk about seeing God, feeling like knowing that Jesus was there. Mm-hmm. And I mean, my housemate actually has had that, and I have broached the topic with him of my own experience, and of course he's quite evangelical, and so wasn't ready to really go there. But he didn't dismiss it. I don't know, but there's certainly accounts of something like that in every single culture. So I don't know.
Yeah. I guess whether or not there's a there, essentially, right. Whether or not there's a there, we're having these experiences, and they're real to us, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that there has to be a there. It's not. I mean, it's not.
Right. Well, it doesn't matter. It's a
seeing.
Right?
I think that I think it's a seeing beyond our everyday attention. It's just about attention, I think.
Well, it's really about what that leads. That there isn't a there doesn't matter to that experience and that having that, because that's really what it's about. You only have your experience of it, right?
Right.
But what those beliefs that you frame that in, the structure that you frame that in, can be deleterious or detrimental, and that's when it matters, right? It matters if you're then taking what you're interpreting and then acting off of it in a way where it's somehow legitimizing something that you actualize in the world, right?
Well, when you take that and you put it into a storyline, is when I think it gets dangerous.
Right.
But I mean, that's what we do. We tell stories to ourselves all the time to explain what we see. And about other people and who they are when we have no idea. It's kind of what we do, and it's part of what makes us human. But as long as we recognize, I think as long as we recognize the non-absoluteness of what we're saying, then have at it, man. It's fun.
Right.
But,
yeah. That's when you get to be an elf, right?
Yeah.
Well, and that's a little bit when things freed up for me, was when I was allowed to just let the shields down, not have such an allergy to letting me have these experiences and think about these things and find them rich and not. It's allergy. It's I feel like that's when things get boring, honestly. It was interesting. Yesterday I was had a couple conversations on Preet's page, and there was another one that was about, she had posted a picture from Fyodor Dostoevsky. There was the brothers Karamazov. They Karamazov. So I read that a couple of years ago, and I read Crime and Punishment a couple of times, and one of them was when I was back in college. I was a big I loved that book, and so I recognized a quote, and I said something, and somebody took the opportunity to make a Calvinist point that the quote was something about that there's a war going on and the battlefield is men's hearts, and it was about God, and he was like, well, if this Dostoevsky didn't know the Word of God, because there is no battle going on, either you're elect or you're not, essentially, is what he was getting at with it. And I was like, well, actually, this is just one of his quotes from one of his characters. And besides Ephesians, I actually quoted the armor of God's because there's a battle going on between Satan and for the hearts of men, essentially. Put on the full armor of God, right? I think it's Ephesians 2 or something like that. He said, well, I don't read other books. I only read the Bible, right? I don't have time for books of men, essentially. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is the first off, that's bullshit. If you're reading my posts and you're interacting with me, clearly you've got some time on your hands to pick up a good book. But there was I can't remember his name. He eventually got really upset with me because he called me dishonest and whatnot. I was actually just giving him honest criticism. I was like, dude, look at Dostoevsky was in Siberian prison camps and was and wrote these stories as a Russian Christian with a very different perspective than yours. Can you not receive? Can your God not reveal Himself to you through these testimonies or through these stories written by this man at a different era? And what a rich experience you could be having. It could enrichen your faith. It could enrichen your relationship with God. You could get new insights. And somebody else chimed in and goes, "No, I agree with Bert. There's what it was he had said that you have a choice. You can either read books by man or you can read the Bible. You have a choice." And I said, "No, it's not a choice. What are you talking about? You have plenty of time in the day to read both." And another guy chimed in and said, "No, I agree with Bert. There's not a choice because if you're a true child of God, you'll just choose this one."
Oi.
And the thing is that when I was thinking about that, I was like, "Well, it's a little bit like what we're talking about, opening yourself up to looking at the wall, not seeing the outlet. It is when you take in foreign films, or you take in, or you read a book from something written 200 years ago, or you read the Bible, right? You can put aside the baggage you bring." Such a richer life and so much more gained from it through other people's experiences, and you're having experiences that you wouldn't have had because you're getting it through them, through their articulation of it.
Yeah, I've been just over the past few months, when I get time, pick up my Kindle and read through the Bible. I'm just still in the first chapters, and I get such a different picture than reading it back when I was a Christian.
That was the one mythology that I never explored with any interest at all, was the Judeo-Christian. I of course was familiar with it because I am American, but it always, I studied the ones around it. I studied the Gilgamesh, and I studied the Indian myths and Egyptian myths and stuff, but I veered far away from that one simply because it had this heavy, it felt like digging through attached to it, that it just felt dry and churchy to me. I didn't want to read that. I didn't want to learn about that culture. I didn't want to until this past year. And it was actually the Christ mythicist stuff that got me looking into it and got me interested in it. Although I'm totally agnostic on that particular theory, but I am now appreciating it as a piece of the puzzle. I'm appreciating that story very much as a piece of the puzzle of my own culture and of the surrounding cultures. It fits right in. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, there. I get into. I've over the last, I would say. It's not true the last year or two, but for probably 3 or 4 years before that, I was reading my Bible every day, and the Bible, and I was reading it because I was taking it in a much different way than I had before. I was reading as much as when I was a Christian. And it was with an interest in understanding the audiences that were being written to, trying to actually like shed some of the baggage I had brought to it before, and I had spent a lot of time in the history since I was fairly up on the history when I was a Christian, but much more so later on after I got out of it. Actually, when I started reading about Palestinian the history of Palestine and the area there back 300, 400, 500 years before Christ. Getting into Josephus's writings, I read 2 summers ago. I read the Antiquities and the Jewish War, and started then going back through the Bible and through the texts, or through the New Testament at least, and understanding each gospel on its own, not seeing them as linked, and understanding each one writing to a given audience at a different time in a different place. And man, it became so much richer. Mm-hmm. And I'd get in conversations then with my pre-sup and Reformed friends on Facebook, and who are dear friends from college, but they would say to me, or there was one in particular who would say to me, "No, you need to read this in context." And what he meant in context, he meant in the context of Christianity in America in 2015 or 14 or whatever. And he's not talking about getting it in context from back then when it was written for the audience it was written. Instead, you have this view of this being a text that is written for all time, that it wasn't written in a snapshot, in a given context, with a group of people relevant, that it was meant to be relevant to, with an intended message, right? Like you just take the Gospel of Luke or the Gospel of Matthew, and each of those is different, and they're different in ways that inform you as to what it is they were trying to get across. They're both different from Mark, and they have little bits of differences, little tiny variations in how the text was either changed or how it had kind of been transmitted over that small little brief period of time between the two. And there's reasons for those little adjustments and twists and turns. And when you look at the accumulation of them, you get a much richer understanding of it. And a lot of it is just letting go of some of these presuppositions and taking it for what it is. Mm-hmm. You know?
Agreed. If you want to talk about context, talk about the cultures around it. And I mean, I cannot express how angry I am at the movie Zeitgeist, because they just did such a horrifying job of they made it into this conspiracy theory bullshit. The whole Christ mythicist movement now, or attempt to get actual exploration of it, is now carries this like, oh, you're talking about that Zeitgeist bullshit. And I'm, no. And it takes away any possibility of looking at the parallels, which there are, and the threads are easily woven together, and the Bible fits right into its surrounding cultures, but you can barely have that conversation because people mock it. People just have this theory, have this idea that you're all of a sudden going to go talk about Roman conspiracy theories, Roman domination, and whatever.
Right.
Well, and some people you're never going to get through to anyway. When you take, no matter what your belief is, doesn't have to even just be one of these religious beliefs. When you still try to keep your beliefs intact when reality crashes against it.
Yes, there's a hardness, a hard armor which gets formed around pictures of reality if they get too comfortable. And
yeah. I think it's threatening. I feel like it's threatening on both sides. I feel like there are those threatened by implications to that are Christians, that don't want to have those conversations, don't want to think about it that way, think that it's a petty or a cheap or a shallow way of looking at things. But you also have atheists who want to see things a certain way. So I feel like there's a lot of defensiveness and a lot of concern with the implications of things being interpreted given ways.
Yeah, not willing to give up any amount of ground because of that. And
Definitely.
there can be a rut
Yeah.
on any side.
I mean, I think about my own family again. My dad's the gushier one because he's a philosopher, so he can think about stuff. My mom, I mean, I swear to God, she's a Newtonian. She's so cynical about anything, quote, like woo. You can hear the contempt in her voice. It's amazing. Like with me, it was no surprise to her because I'm just the weirdo that I am. But I mean, it's like there is just zero interest in. She tried a little bit to understand where I was coming from years and years ago, but she gave up. I mean, it's just, and I'm not coming from anywhere woo.
Right. I think it's hard for people to open up for abstract thought sometimes.
Yeah,
or at least understanding it.
I'm going to flatter both of you and tell you that's what I enjoy about both of you, is I've seen both of you in Hangouts being very open and honest and not so rigid in what you're wanting to assert. And it's not that you don't have, it's a little like Ollie, you talked about being, as much an atheist as ever. It's not like you don't have positions. It's more that you're not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater, as it were.
I guess so. You can call me, I forgot to say this, you can call me Lydia. My name is Lydia, and it's easier to say than Lallie. Like my real name is Lydia.
Okay. Sounds good.
And, I mean, so, that it just removes one impediment to the conversation. So you don't have to stutter on it.
You notice my difficulty, huh?
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I haven't even tried it. Don't worry.
Yeah, there you go. I don't have anything to assert. I mean, I occasionally will poke at a theist if they really get. I'm mostly a lurker. If you haven't noticed, I'm a peanut gallery side chatter by druthers. If I have my druthers, I don't know if I would speak very frequently, but occasionally I'll say things like, "What if I told you that what if I told you that I'm older than Jesus? What if I told you that I am?" And I'll try to get them to question me on that, and they just don't even go there.
Right.
It's odd. It's odd. I'm like, come on, man. I'm like committing blasphemy in your eyes. Why aren't you challenging me? Like, they don't.
And,
I think they just think I'm crazy.
Why do you think that is?
I think they just think I'm crazy.
They think
I
you're
think
trolling,
they just think I'm crazy. No, crazy, just crazy.
It might be the avatar. I guess if you said I am, and you had your avatar's a little spooky.
Well, yeah, she does kind of like have that like scornful expression, which was one of the points of choosing it, besides the hair.
I like the hair.
Yeah.
And I just don't care on here. I have positions, right? And I don't even espouse that I always have good reasons for my positions. Of course, there's reasons, and someone wants to ask me about them, or I have talked about them. I'll explain them. If someone wants to show me where the bad reasoning is, then obviously my beliefs are going to change. I'm exploring all these others because, like I said to begin with, I'm not convinced any of them are right. Not that they don't have right parts to them, but that any single one is right. I think we just go by our experience and how we live.
I want to point out that
Okay.
I just wanted to point out quickly that WTF Scully did say your avatar has a nice body, though.
She is perky, isn't she?
She is. Yep.
She's perky.
I'm sorry, you were going to say though.
Oh, I think one of the other reasons I haven't asserted a position very strongly is that I don't know how to assert it at all. I don't have good arguments for it.
Right.
And I don't think it's really arguable for, in a way, because I'm not. The thing is, I'm not really disagreeing with anybody or agreeing with anybody.
Is
Right.
it
atheists are right and theists are right, and well, the theists are not necessarily right from my position.
Is it using the word assert that's the problem? Is it you certainly opine, right? You have opinions on things. I think assert usually gets taken as asserting as the case in a sense that is much like that word carries a little bit of a firmer than merely assenting to or believing or opining.
Well, honestly, I'm terrified to be challenged on it because I don't like. I don't. My ego is enough left that I'm not good at that.
Is it too much? Is it too much work?
I fumble badly. when I'm under pressure. So.
Well, it is not an environment that is that affords mistakes, right? You are not allowed to be imprecise.
Right.
And since I'm all about imprecision, and I'm like, I'll just say never mind. Like I just vagueness.
Take it back. I don't think that.
And like you said, Bert, with throwing the baby out with the bathwater, just you can have a worldview that has some bad reasoning in it or some problems with it. That doesn't mean that that view is wrong and it should get thrown out. But I think in this environment, it leads to that, or it tries to convince you that that's the case.
Right. Well, here's my clinging magic thing. Like one of the things that I did was firewalking several years ago, and I would do it again in a second. And when I was in Joe's hangout a couple weeks ago, James was like, "I know the science behind that." I'm like, "No, you cannot tell me. I do not want to know. I don't want to know. I don't know. I don't want to know why that works. I use it to break myself of the idea that my perception is accurate, or that my preconceived ideas are accurate. So that is that's a tool, and if I know the science behind it, it will no longer be an effective tool. So leave me alone. Like, leave me my mystery."
Yeah, we watched a really, it's along the same lines, but this might take a second to get out. There was a movie I watched last night. What was it called? Broke Down Circle or something like that. It was actually a Belgian film that had bluegrass in it. It was this really weird mix. It was nominated for, I think, for Best Foreign Film last year or something. But in it, there's a girl, this couple who's into bluegrass in Belgium. It's a wild film. It's really like a mix of things. Like they start, the first scene is them singing a bluegrass song, and I'm like, oh, this is like an American film. And then they come down, they start, they're all speaking, and their subtitles come up, and I'm like, oh, what? But in the course of the film, a daughter has there's a bird that flies into the window, and their daughter, this bird dies, and the daughter says that she's holding it and she's crying furiously, and the father's trying to explain it to her, and she says later on, I think one of those stars up there is the bird now. And he's like, oh, which one is it? And he's actually like this really firm atheist. He's actually got a lot of issues with. It takes place in the early 2000s when Bush was shutting down stem cell research, and this was kind of ticking this guy off. And he sings these bluegrass songs that have some of them have some country lyrics that deal with God, but he's very much opposed to it. But he kind of enjoys the music and whatnot. But he doesn't dissuade her out of this. But later, the girl, I'm going to ruin the movie, the girl dies of cancer. And the mom sees later on a bird that keeps coming by the window. And she starts to think, oh, maybe this is her, and I need to protect her from running into the windows. She actually puts these like bird stickers on the windows to prevent the birds from flying into them. And the father ends up chastising her. And it becomes this really interesting tale of like, she's like, look, I just need to believe this, right? I need this to kind of to cope and to be able to have, enjoy things or whatever. And this ends up being this conflict for me where how important is it? Well, I guess this gets back to what we were talking. I kind of went down this long road now, but this gets us back to this earlier.
It ties.
Gets us back to that earlier point of like, at what point is it okay, and at what point is it not okay to believe in false things, or to have, and a little bit of it is that we're kind of wired for it. Like we need some of these things.
Right.
This was really this was really beautiful. Let me just share one more thing. The girl later, before she dies, she's got these stars up on the. She's in one of those chambers that don't allow her to get germs or whatever, and they place these glow-in-the-dark stars on the outside.
Hyperbaric.
And the father, she says to the father, "Can you tell me about the stars again?" He goes, "What are you talking about?" She goes, about them dying. And she goes, and he proceeds to tell her about how the light that we're seeing the star, but it may have died years and years ago, but we still get to see it and enjoy it. And you realize that she's talking about the bird, and she's talking about herself. And it ends up being this really cool, like, okay, I know the star's not out there anymore, but can I still enjoy it? Can I still enjoy the light from it, right? It ends up being this really beautiful kind of imagery for knowing what's behind it, or knowing what is the case, but allowing yourself or affording yourself some flexibility to enjoy the experience, or whatever meaning you get out of thinking it otherwise. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely I do. And I think that it's about perspective again. As long as you are aware of the nature of that story and that you're using it for that, or that, as long as you're not falling headlong into the story, I say go for it. But I mean, things like superstitions, things like I don't know, my little tiny little Zen garden that with a picture of a Mexican goddess in it. A statue of a Mexican goddess in it. I love it. I think I value it. I draw little patterns in it. I would cry if the statue broke. I don't think that she is the mother of all creation. But I'll still call her by name and treat her respectfully. You know what I mean?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Your experiences that are attached to it have the meaning, carry the meaning. It's a little bit what we were talking about before, about that. It's the experience that you're having that's important. That's what's true. Even if the target of it is not, right? Do you have any thoughts about that stuff, Xbox?
I'm lost in thought, because I'm thinking we go along with reality, and when things clash with that, we call that, if we hold on to that belief, we call that unreasonable. But I think we all have unreasonable beliefs and basis. I don't think there's a single person on the earth you could find that doesn't hold these. So I would say whether we want them or not, we're stuck with them.
Yeah.
And I think there is a dangerous line, but how how we define that line just depends on where your perspective. If you're a humanist, you're going to care whether anybody holds bad beliefs. If influence that could harm themselves or harm others, some people are going to draw the line where it becomes of just harming others. I'm not your parent. Let you have crazy beliefs and hurt yourself all you want. I think it's just going to depend on how your perspective of where you want to draw that line. But I do think there is a common line with most, that when it becomes harming others or starts leading others down paths that can get them harmed, we all draw a line there.
Well, that's between action and belief. Belief is different from acting on belief. And beliefs do influence one's actions, definitely, but that's again the degree to which one commits falls inside of the belief, I guess. I don't know if I'm not really agreeing with myself at this point.
Well, no, and like you said earlier, you can't separate culture and your just history of experiences in your life from your beliefs. They are what make your beliefs. So you would have to remove more than just than changing someone's belief. You'd have to convince them that a lot of their experiences were something other than they were.
Right. I mean, even this is what I've been thinking about lately for the last week or so, is how our linguistic patterns and how people's linguistic patterns reflect and underlie our basic assumptions. Like, what is an object? Like, if CK hears this, he's going to be like, Mariology is talking about Mariology.
You're in good company here.
It was I only learned the word Mariology and Mariological nihilism from your guys' conversation. And I was like, that sounds like a Western sortivization of what I think. Maybe someone will understand what I mean now. That's great.
Right.
So I adopted the term. I'm like, all right, okay. I found one position I hold.
A lot of my intuitions come from, or they don't come from, a lot of my intuitions come from me, but they lean towards the Eastern philosophies, just put in a Western way. Or into words.
I haven't figured out how to put them into Western words yet. Like, okay, I got neutral monism, and I have Mariological nihilism, and those are pretty much the only two that I've found. And even those are sort of not really saying the whole picture, but I haven't found things that I disagree with in them yet, so we'll see.
Yeah, no, like we said before, it's tough getting the concepts out. Language is a barrier, and then the woo ideas are a barrier.
Right. Even the saying what something is made of. Think about what it implies that something made it. It implies that there's a stuff and a stuffer. So even the structure of our language implies that Abrahamic tradition. It seems to me. So it's hard to get past that inside of our heads, even.
Yeah, I've had to dive back into some of as far back as I can go in philosophy, even just Western philosophy, even. That's why I delve into solipsism, which allowed me to find our epistemic limits, right? Oh, what's the limit? That's the reason I would say that all views are unknowable and become down to almost like a thought experiment. But then they can't think of how to word what I'm saying. Go ahead. I think you get the idea of what I'm saying. I'll try to think how to word it.
Yeah. Solipsism, it's almost, I can almost get on board in a way with that, well, I definitely understand what solipsism implies, and the way you take it as an epistemic thing, and I don't disagree with that. But there's almost a way to take that as one end of the the magnet, we'll say, of my metaphysics. It's kind of like, okay, I am both the only mind and an individual mind. If that makes sense.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense. Never mind.
No, because
I tried to make it come out of my mouth and it didn't work.
No, because that's the view that I look at it, is that it can be both. If you know what metaphysical solipsism is that they're actually, when you're saying mind there, some people do attribute that to God. When you say my mind is the only mind that exists, it's saying that we all have experience. We don't have individual minds. That it's all one thing.
Oh, see, that's not where I was going. Yeah. Because I don't think that.
Confusing me then.
Yeah, I know. I'm confusing myself, dude. I don't know how to say this. I'm not a solipsist, but I am an epistemological. I don't know what the fuck I am.
Right.
Pardon my French. I'm having a really hard time getting things out of my mouth today.
Yeah, and
Ask
when
me a
I
question, moderator.
that might not be the correct term for epistemological solipsism or epistemological nihilism. Those, like you said, with the mereological and the monism, those might not be complete terms for what I'm saying, or accurate enough.
Right. I find it daunting to talk about. Well, of course, I will quote the Tao now. The Tao that can be spoken is not the Tao. So that's how I know I'm right, because I can't fucking say it.
Yeah, I think a lot of it goes against intuitions on a lot of beliefs. Even going down science, right? Science shows our intuition's wrong all the time, and it's hard to separate that from what's actually going on.
I found that, I mean, I've read a lot. I've read not most. I won't even make that claim. I've read a lot of the quote sacred texts, and the one that, you know how some people say I read the Bible and everything made sense to me. That's how I felt about the Tao Te Ching. It was like, okay, my intuition, this meshes with my intuitions.
Mm-hmm.
At least after I had my, whatever the fuck it was, pardon, I'm really swearing a lot. The ego death thing. After that, when I reread the Tao Te Ching, I was like, this book is talking about that. And then I saw all of the other myths in a new light, at least the Eastern ones. All of the Hindu myths, all of the Buddhist bells and whistles. I saw what was underneath it. I think I did anyway. I could see that the root as being very, very closely tied, and that then lots and lots of layers of storytelling on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Right on.
So, right on. And even in some of the Western stuff, yeah, but not all.
That's what I find fun exploring. It is thing that not that this validates my intuitions or anything, but finding philosophies that go along with your intuitions, knowing that you're not alone with these intuitions.
And even in some of the Western it was nice to find, because after that experience, I dove headlong into things like, how do I get back there? I chased the dragon, man. I tried. I went. I did the whole Kundalini thing. I did the whole, like, okay, sonic this, that, and the other, the isochronic tones. I'm trying to get myself back into that state somehow. Like, there's got to be a road there, and there's not. Because it's not anywhere other than where I am. But I tried really, really hard to 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 find one practice or another that would be the right one, and it didn't. There wasn't one. So.
Yeah, no, and that's good to be aware of, and even on any Western, Eastern, any of these positions, is to be aware that you can get stuck in these positions. You can find something that matches up so much with what you think that you almost become unreasonable without knowing it, and you stick to this position and close off others, like you said, put that armor around you, and just being aware and being careful of how you're taking these is good.
In my house, I have representations of a shitload of different traditions. I have, I don't know, Buddhist things and Hindu things and Mexican things and Hawaiian things and Greek things. And I don't know, I have the Venus of Willendorf as well on my wall. So I don't know. I like.
You keep a perspective on our culture, on our history, almost like a mix of anthropology and sociology together, which I don't think should be just thrown out, even if completely made up. Well, completely made up at the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I keep them around, but I enjoy them. That's why. And I enjoy saying the mantras I used to think were going to liberate me. I enjoy thinking about this stuff, and I enjoy telling the stories. So I have this whole collection called Homo Mythologos, and things about stories. So.
Cool.
What would you say when you said that you enjoy saying the mantras that you felt would liberate you? What's the quality, I guess, your experience, or what's the value to you now, as you see it?
It's pretty much the same as it was then, but I don't have mantra is used to effectively still the voice. They are a useful tool to shut up the narrator in our heads. That's what they're for. I don't like mantras in languages I understand. I enjoy the ones, I prefer the ones that I really don't know what they mean at this point, because they are syllables, and that's all. They're music.
That's interesting.
So.
Yeah. So does that help you keep an open mind on it, like a blank mind, instead of thinking about the meaning of them?
Well, I guess so. That's what they were originally for too. Even when people did understand the words, you blend the syllables together over and over and over again, and you can do it with your name if you're. You know how a word loses its meaning if you say it over and over again, and you start to listen to the syllables instead. You can do it with any phrase, but I am pretentious enough to enjoy the ones in Sanskrit. So there. But yeah, that's what a mantra is. It's not a magic spell. It's to distract your thinking mind, into appreciating the actuality of sound. I think. Plus, they're fun to say. And for me, I have ADD, and my brain is constantly talking. So I recently diagnosed ADD, by the way, and I'm 41. So
it was really, really difficult, if not impossible, for me to meditate without something else to do. That's why I used yoga, but mantra was absolutely necessary for me to be able to meditate at all, because my brain just went. So,
keep it focused. Right on.
Yeah.
What was that again? How did your brain go?
It was, but that was a different pitch.
Oh, I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, DreamWorks has yoga Tuesdays and Thursdays at lunch, and I did it for a while, and I could not believe how much better my day was. Only in that it got me to stop thinking about work. I'm like you. I get really frustrated. I can't turn my brain off. I'm hyper aware of everything. I drift really easily. I can occupy my mind. I get preoccupied with thoughts all the time and just can't focus on things that I want to focus on or not focus on things. And that was, I can understand what you're saying about the monsters actually having being it's almost like noise canceling headphones or something, right? Like
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
I'm hanging out with my buddy Doug, and he was listening to this, right? Because I'm not using earbuds or whatever, and he's just like, who doesn't? Who doesn't have thoughts going? Like, I'm a ruminator. I totally admit.
I need some Maute canceling headphones.
Alana, Ozzy's wife, told me that she has the opposite phenomenon where she can get so focused on what it is he's talking about while they're walking that she could walk right out into traffic. Like, he actually will have to stop her. Like, she becomes so focused on things, and I'm exactly the opposite. If I hear an echo in one of your guys' things, I can't talk. Like, it paralyzes me.
Well, I think that's a different situation, and I agree with her. I don't agree with her. That's her experience. When I'm by myself, I have a ruminative mind. When I'm in a discussion, I try to be focused as possible.
Yeah, I definitely, I call it the kaleidoscope effect when I'm having a hard time speaking. I found different strategies throughout the years to shut my head up, and most of them were unhealthy ways. Mantra's one of the healthy ways, so just having another, if my brain takes me in directions that I don't want to go and don't want to stay in, I don't know, things, because I'm a ruminator, and I tend to run a tape in my head, usually not thoughts I want to think. So putting something else there in its place, like noise-canceling headphones, exactly, has been necessary. I don't know. But yeah, I think most people have a narrator to some extent or another. It's just whether it impedes your actual life or not. They call it Maute in the Toltec stuff. Matote.
Let me take the opportunity to say welcome beyond psychology. Did you have something you want to add?
My name's Adam, by the way. So the channel's name. The channel's name is Beyond Psychology because I approach a lot of issues that mainstream psychology doesn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole because it's career killers, and I really just don't care about career. I don't care about, like, my goals are different, aligned, but I am not beyond psychology. I don't really think anybody is. Just wanted to make that clear. But yeah, so I've got a lot to add about all of this, and like as you guys were talking about everything, that's when the thoughts were popping in my head at each given moment where I had something to add to it, and really I could probably go on for days, like you were saying, not to dominate the conversation. So I've been trying to hold back a lot because I've been working on this. Everything you guys are talking about has been my life's work for the past 15 years. When I was 21, I moved into the woods cabin. It's kind of like the monk on top of a mountain for the Western world. I got an inheritance, was fortunate, I didn't have to work. I withdrew from society because I knew it was broken, and I just needed time to process and say, well, what the fuck is going on here, right? So I did that, and I examined a lot of pieces of reality. I watched hundreds, maybe over 1,000 documentaries. I don't know, lost count. I didn't have any distractions. I didn't have the brainwash from dealing with the outside world. I didn't listen to the radio. I didn't watch television. So I just completely emptied my mind and learned how to think, basically. And then I re-examined everything, and then I actually used Xbox Live as a think tank resource, where for years I had conversations with people about these issues. And for 2 years, every single day, I'd find 1 or 2 people every day to have this conversation with that you guys are having right now. And I would start the conversation normally, but then out of nowhere, I would just start my polling, and they didn't realize I was doing psychological polling. So I was getting very accurate results. Because, if the subject knows they're being studied, it skews the results, basically. So right. I would start out by asking people what they thought life was, what they told themselves reality was, or what they are. Like inside your self-affirmation saying, I'm a human, my name's Joe, I'm a doctor, I play tennis, I'm this, I'm that, I'm not this type of person, what am I? I'm this, right? So, and then why do they choose that? Where does that come from?
No, yeah, that's a funny story on it. That not too long ago, a friend on here was telling a story about he got a phone call, anonymous phone call, and he missed it, so he called it back, and the person on the other end was, who is this? And he was like, this how bored I get. He said, I was going to answer with my name, but then I sat and thought about it, and is my name really who I am? And then just kind of went deeper into that, and it's kind of parallel what you say, which is kind of, it's a neat thing, and it relates to what we actually were talking about earlier about identifying, or the labels that we put, and separating I from the universe, or the universe from I, and why we do that.
Yeah, there's a meme I like with the smiley dog on it, and it says, "Did you know that the brain named itself?" I think is what it said. So right. I find it amusing that I look at it as it's our security blankets. It's much like religion, where we want to label everything, put it in a box, make it understandable, say we know what it is. That way we feel safe. So if we say we're a human, my name's Joe, I now know what I am. I'm safe. I don't have to face the fear of this insane ride through the universe, hurling through space, connected to the Earth or whatever, not knowing what we are, what the universe is, where any of this comes from. It's terrifying. The entire human race doesn't want to face that, and that is the root cause of so many psychological issues. But again, this is all products of things that I found out through my studies. And so many of the things that people live their life by are, like you guys were saying, it's true but it's not true, and it is but it isn't, and that's cool, because I look at things from a standpoint of probability. We don't know, so a lot of things are just concepts, ideas, temporary placeholders. Everything has a different probability of being true or not, and so you base that probability on the evidence you have. That's the best we got, and you allow those the possibility of those probabilities to be true to fluctuate. So I call it hovering probability liquid, hovering possibilities of liquid probability. So I allow it to flow. I don't say I know what I am. I don't pretend to know what I am. I dissociate from self as much as possible. It's hard to do when the rest of the world doesn't see things the same way, but I just allow to be, basically, by accepting that I don't know what I am. And then I change fluently.
Language will push you into that too, into having to say I and things like that, and talk about the self in that way.
I like putting quotes around it, but
right
around self.
Yeah, when I write, I'm like, I would love to just have some program that automatically put the quotes around I and self, you and me. But, you know, I do it just once in a while to make a point. And, you know, our language was created by people who believed that, you know, we were created by God and that we had never-ending, everlasting souls. And so they believed in excessive individualism. Mm-hmm. And that was solidified to them. And their concept of a soul was likely to, again, security blanket, say that I know what I am, and I know that I'm not going to die. I don't have to be afraid of death because I know we're going to go somewhere, we're going to be safe, right? They created language. So all of language is supported by this concept of excessive individualism, and then continues...
All of Indo-European language. Not all of language. All of Indo-European language.
Right. Western world. Yeah, my bad. Yes, indeed.
Because it's very easily expressed in other languages.
Yeah. I'm one part Western, yeah. One part Eastern, and one part I don't know.
Yeah, I don't...
So I would offer that...
I think that there's a huge amount of comfort. That you're talking about the fear of death thing. What this did for me was I lost all fear of death. Mm-hmm. Not that I had a lot before, because I just thought I'd... and I still think that what I call me is going to be recycled, and that's great. But I no longer feel like the I that I call me will be extinguished, because I don't have that anymore. I don't have an I. I mean, I have it, obviously, in some respect, because here I am. But I'm as immortal as I need to be. And I'm as old. I always say this, I am literally as old as the hills. So,
old as the stars, even.
So
exactly. I'm old.
There's multiple paths to getting to where we are at. And this is something relating to emergent consciousness. I made a series that outlines the different stages of emergent consciousness and where we're at as a species and where we may possibly go. And so I got there, you know, you can get there, you know, through different means, like I was saying, and it looks like you've gotten there through a very abstract way, which is really cool. And I got there through learning science, and then I just landed on it, like by accident, totally.
Can you explain what emergent consciousness
is? Actually, sure, I will. I think she said, you're unspeakable, right? Or Lydia. Okay.
I'm Lydia, yeah.
I think you did say you learned about quantum mechanics and physics and things like that.
No, I learned about biology. I'm a horticulturist by trade.
Okay.
But I learned about mythology first, so.
Okay, but biology, microbiology, physics, chemistry, astrophysics, astronomy, all of these things led me to the answers of what actually happens when we die, like logically speaking. And like once we understand that all the particles in your body go back to the system, become the food again, and then get taken back up into the future forms of consciousness, get used to produce the cells, basically we become the future forms of consciousness. And so that's a high probability of being axiomatic. I'm not saying that's 100% the way it works for the facts, but it's probably true.
Well, but there's hold on. So the we become the consciousness is the we is what you would need to define there, right? Like
the bits and pieces.
Right, but is the bits and pieces are they? Is that what I mean?
Look like David Copperfield there.
Yeah. At least three of us in here that you're talking to, I'm not sure would call the bits and pieces the same thing you're calling the bits and pieces.
Yeah. I mean, I was trying to save from scientific jargon, but you know the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, trace elements, all of those.
You're talking about the constituents of me, but the fact that they are. That they make me like it is that they are in their current state that it is me, right?
Right. It's
like when it's no longer in this state, at some point it's no longer going to be me, even though it's the constituent bits that make up me.
Right. I want to challenge. I wanted to say when you talk about the bits and pieces, you said you were talking about the chemicals, and that's one layer, right? Because those, and this makes perfect sense to scientists, as that the stuff, the chemicals, the chemical compounds, the elements that make up me originated somewhere and are very, very old. That's one layer. But what makes up the elements? What makes those up? The atoms. What makes up the atoms? The electrons. What makes up the there's no way. There's nothing there. There's nothing there but movement. There's nothing there but the pattern. That's where I've finally got to. That there is nothing there. It's structural. It's form. It's pattern. It's not stuff. And then you think about matter, as opposed to whatever this consciousness is, and there's no line there anymore. There's no line.
Right.
I think that we draw a line.
Feynman suggested that it was a single electron universe. That there was,
that's actually really fascinating.
Yeah,
it's all made of the same stuff.
Yeah, well, there's one that is just a single electron in multiple places from different views. It's called like the fishbowl theory or something like that, where you have a bunch of monitors looking at one fishbowl, and it's looking all from different angles, but you're seeing all the monitors.
I think this is another example where science and philosophy have a cooperative endeavor where the things that were self-apparent to us, that there was something called consciousness that we can't fill a pint glass with, and then there's something called matter that we can. There must be something different between the two, and dualism, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's being broken apart to the point where, in the same way that science has influenced philosophy in that, the unanswered questions that could be answered are being answered in the natural sense. The questions about nature are being answered. So now it's kind of language. Now the language of the philosophy of science is shaping science. I think that the more we learn about these quantum levels of things, and as we understand it, it'll have more bearing on the classic philosophical questions that people still think about.
Mm-hmm. And the more people will agree with the Eastern people, I think.
Yes.
They'll go, gosh darn it, Lao Tzu was right.
I guess for me the we part, that point that I just made, and the meaning part, or what we when we're using words and we're articulating thoughts, that we want to reduce this stuff down, but when I refer to me and I refer to Bert, right, and I have a label, there is a meaning to that, and it's a meaning to me immediately in using it and talking to people and communicating ideas and thoughts and things. These aren't just arbitrary labels. They're things that we use, right? Like there's a reason we have them, and so what I think is part of the danger is it's not to trivialize or reduce to the point where you lose the emergence or the properties that supervene or that become because of these relationships, because of these constituent bits coming together. There's meaningful things there.
Absolutely. It's a recognizable and beautiful pattern. I think of it like a whirlpool in a river, or a knot in a this is an image that I'm sure people have heard before if you listen to Alan Watts, but or if you've read Buddhist stuff. But a rope, that one part is made of hemp rope, one part is made of silk, and the next is like a red ribbon, and the next is this. But there's a knot tied in it. But if it's a loose knot, you can move the knot down you can move the knot along the string, and the materials of which the knot is made will change, but the knot is still recognizable as the knot. And that's how I feel about this self, because I am just a recognizable pattern of this, but I'm not the same as I was. It's certainly not physically 7 years ago, obviously by the wrinkles, but my mind is not even the same.
It's the ship of Theseus for people, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So the old woman is not the young woman is when she's old is not it's no longer the young woman, right? They're two different people, even though they're the same person.
But she is.
Right.
In another way, she is the same person.
Right.
Because
right,
she's still the recognizable pattern.
Right. She's the continuum of that. Right.
Structurally, on the surface, with our limited senses, but if we start bringing into play, that we have microscopes and MRIs, and we can really start to look at the structure and see that it's actually not the same. Like you were saying, like every 7 to 10 years, or you nibbled or hinted at, every 7 to 10 years we discard over 90% of our physical matter and replace it with new physical matter. As we travel along that rope, we're consuming bits and pieces of the field and trading off energies, even with the Earth and the Higgs field. And so really technically in a 7 to 10 year period of time, we are physically a different being. We are these copies upon copies. This is happening gradually over time every single day. Our brain matter stays the same. We don't get rid of that. We add to it through our developmental years, and then it changes shape. It rewires, obviously. And our lives, from a universal perspective, are a fart in a tornado. So the whole process of our individual life and then the death, it happens so fast. It's like a brain cell living and dying in our brain, or maybe even faster, really, and comparatively. And so, I've started to perceive time as a river, and all of the universe, all of the matter and energy is like a big sea of matter and energy, and we're all part of it flowing at the same time. And there isn't really like time. There isn't like the past. It was just motion, and like we were over there, and now we're over here, and we're going this direction. That's all.
Are we? Are we though?
More than likely.
It could be a B theory, right? You could just be having.
Are we going somewhere?
Well.
No.
Well, from what we think we understand that our galaxies are moving away from each other, which does insinuate that they're going somewhere, and we are fairly certain, if not it being a fact, that our star is being tugged around by the black hole at the center of our galaxy, and it's also, not only is it going around it, it's also going up and down. How
would we know we were going somewhere if there weren't something else to look at?
Yeah, I think it becomes a matter
to compare
of scope.
Ourselves to.
It becomes a matter of scope and perspective of how you're talking.
Yeah. And I was thinking about the relation between our physical selves and the quote outside world. It's all transactional. We're constantly being eaten and eating. We're absorbing we are, yeah.
So how does this help with ADHD or ADD?
This is the perfect conversation for ADD.
That was another subject.
That was about of ADD.
Say that again, Maute.
I said, other than the fact that it's a demonstration of ADD.
That's right.
Schizophrenia also, so we don't know. The jury's out on that. But so I have another theory. I'm actually currently working on the video series. I just finished the script yesterday. I got to make some diagrams. I got to film it, edit it, upload it. But it's explaining how individualism is an oversimplification of our reality. So I look at all of life on the entire planet, the whole biosphere, as a superorganism. Perhaps the entire universe is a superorganism. And the pando tree, I don't know if you guys know about this, like the largest organism on the planet. We think that
yes, I know about trees.
Right? We think that it shares the same root. So we see these separate offshoots, and we would say, hey, look, there's separate trees. But they're all sharing the same roots. They're all actually the same life form. And so I look at us kind of like the hairs growing on the arm, or the brain cells / sensory organs of the planet or the universe. The universe does not know it exists unless complex biological consciousness exists to say that it does, to acknowledge that it does. So, I mean, if we need purpose...
Oh, go ahead.
There it goes, purpose.
I would say if you're a math guy, look into fractals. And if you're a biology, if you like the tree thing, look into fungus, because mycology is a trove of images for that.
Right.
That image. So.
Right, and I was oversimplifying and using analogies to save time, and you know, I look at things visually, and I've encompassed all of these things. So you know, it starts out.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you. That's why, like, I was trying to suggest some of the images, because I think that visual thinking is actually helpful in this whole conversation, because I can rarely put things into words, but I know what my brain tells me it's about.
Mm-hmm. I speak a lot through analogy, and I learn a lot through analogy. Yeah.
Personal experience and phenomenology is how we experience reality. The study of psychology is understanding individual differences. If there was no individuality, there would be no individual differences to study.
So,
True.
the way I explain that, the reason why I use the pando tree is it works so well. The root system is, you know, our origins. The soil medium is like the universe, and then, you know, with the roots, you've got the fungal system, the bacterias, you've got all the nutrients, you've got the structural geometry that produces our genetics, and you've got all the properties that created the chemicals, you know, stars or whatever part of the soil. Then the trunks of the tree is like the path that each upshoot of genetic code traveled. And then each genetic code is affected a little bit differently, or branch of our genetic code is a little bit different based on all of the cause and effect due to the locality of its, you know, circumstances were slightly different, triggers epigenetic responses. So each one's a little bit different, and then that's what we think is individualism. And so at the top of the tree we have the expression, the phenotype expression of our biology. So yes, we have these differences, and we can say that we even have different sensory information. You know, like if your hair had a brain or an eyeball, you know, the hair in your butt knows what your butt smells like, and the hair on your arm doesn't. You can have one hair that's curled a little bit differently, one hair that's straight. They're all still part of the body. So I think that, like I say, individualism is an oversimplification, and we put too much emphasis in our Western world on individualism. That's why I say I'm part Western and part Eastern, because they both had a piece of the equation that was right, or likely right, and then they both had some bias and some lack of awareness, and we didn't have all the puzzle pieces until, you know, now, or
Well, I think
more of them, whatever.
They're addressing different things is where I think that the issue probably is. Right? One's trying to address the nature of reality, and one's talking about one's experience of reality.
Right, and I mean, they're both necessary.
Yeah, yeah.
They're part of the equation, right?
Yep.
So the reason why I say that it's pretty much mandatory that we look at things like this is because I've been watching individualism get in the way of progress for so many years now. You got so many what I call corruptions, because I don't have a better word to put it, that come from this concept of individualism.
Essential.
Yeah, this mass separation, and then we compartmentalize everything in our reality, like the speciesism and races and all of this, to the point where we fracture the life form. The superorganism is at odds. And then more corruptions occur where some of them become like some cancerous growth that's attacking itself. And so I see this happening all over, and I could go on and on for days about these corruptions. Yeah, so I'm trying to perpetuate a different idea for humanity to grapple a hold of and use as its placeholder for now that will yield more unity and allow the scientific community to agree with it while the spiritual community can agree with it.
Okay, I have 2 quick points. One of them is a reiteration of my previous point, which is it sounds like this is demonstrating ADD than giving any kind of explanation for how to address ADD. The second is, no offense, Beyond, but the more you talk, the less I can sink my teeth into what you're saying.
Yeah.
I would agree.
I apologize.
It's really, I mean, no, it's really hard to, it's hard to spew it out all at once, is the thing. I think the most effective way, in my experience, to communicate this stuff is to ask questions. is to ask the difficult things, like who are you, like what are you, and I think that if it's not effective in the wrong crowd, but I haven't found. I mean, thousands of years of Buddhist monks didn't come up with that for nothing, because there's no way to tell people. There's no way to explain it.
And just like having any of these conversations, and especially when you go into philosophy, if you get a foundation of the way you're talking and the way you're using words and what you mean by certain words, and once that foundation is laid, these conversations can run more focused, because now, as you're going through it, or anybody like that does this, they go through it, and you'll have to add a backstory to every time you start saying something. It ends up being just a big vacuous conversation to begin with, and it's hard to, like Matt said, sink your teeth into. But I don't think this is in particular to Mike. Was it Mike? What was his name?
Adam.
Adam. Sorry, I don't think it's in particular to Adam. So no, I'm not picking on you here. I think this goes on in philosophy discussions. I think this goes on in a number of other discussions.
It's important to stick to find one point. I think.
I think we. I mean, one thing that might be interesting to talk about is the notion of the notion of the individual versus the what the benefit is of thinking of ourselves as the collective or as the whole. Mm-hmm. There's a what is lost and what is gained by doing that, and why do we do it? Right? There's clearly a reason why we identify as selves.
Well, right? That's what I think, that separation I was talking about. I think we individualize to navigate reasonableness, right? To work in reality reasonably, versus unreasonably, and the other would be looking at the reality that we're working in.
And I didn't mean to suggest an antithetical relationship between the two. It's not that you can't hold both and find benefit from both. It's if we're thinking too much of ourselves in one aspect, how is it that we why would we want to change, and how would we do that, essentially?
Yeah. What I was trying to say is those lines get crossed when you take the individual and you start applying that to reality. And if you take the whole and then try to apply that to your individual experiences of reality.
So, are we talking about collective? What sort of collective are you talking about? That's something that I didn't connect that to what we were talking about before. I sort of did in that on a purely human scale, but can you go through what you were talking about there, like seeing ourselves as one human kind? Is that what you're talking about, or?
I think it was Adam. Adam, it was what you were talking about, human consciousness, or the whole consciousness. You applied it to all of mankind, or to the universe being a superorganism. Right. How are you meaning of that bigger consciousness? Is that what you're asking, Lydia?
Sort of. I think I kind of got lost. I got lost there. I ignore the question if it didn't have much to do with what you were actually talking about. But I'm having. I hope I didn't give the impression that I thought that having an individual consciousness was a negative, or that it wasn't completely valid, or that I don't think I have one. That's not. That's a miscommunication if that was the impression I gave. There's simply there's another awareness that is a useful fiction that I use, that is necessary.
Lydia, are you referring to me misunderstanding?
In general, I couldn't tell whether it was my expression that Maute wasn't understanding, or whether it was Adam's. And I suddenly realized that I may have given the impression that I have somehow lost my that I thought it was a bad thing.
Well, maybe
to feel
Maute,
like an individual.
Can you rephrase what you're asking, Maute?
Sure. So, the way I remember it, Lydia, you had brought up the idea, and then Adam had run with it a little bit. And maybe it was my misinterpretation, but upon having run with it, I did get the impression that individualistic thinking, or the idea of an individual, was somehow less valued than the collectivist position, from a philosophical perspective.
I can explain.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, so wasn't quite done with the pando tree analogy, but or relating it to our ecosystem or consciousness.
Well, if you weren't done and you talked as long as you did, I'm going to be a little rude and ask you to tighten it up a little bit. The more concise you are, the better we'll be able to address this.
Right. Yeah. So it's a complicated topic, and it has many different supporting factors. I've been trying. I totally agree with you. I wish that I could shorten it up more. I'm trying. The best I've been able to do is cut it up into chunks, and I make video series at like under 10 minutes each piece. And like, I'm giving you 15 years of life's work here that would fill a huge book. So this is a small piece of it, really. Anyway, so with each phenotype expression, which we call an individual, and that's like the top of the tree, or the top of one of the upshoots of the pando tree. And so that is exposed to different sensory information. It has its own processing, but at the same time, we're still part of the universe, and a lot of our consciousness is coming from the forms of consciousness that came before us and thought things and then passed those thoughts through us. And that's what I refer to as the wave of consciousness, and dipping into our combined knowledge pools. And then we all have the genetic memory that we share, which is really like tying us together as well. And so we can perceive something as an individual, and we can say that it's our thought. We had a thought. It's ours. But I don't see that is necessarily the truth, when almost everything that we think is based on things that we learned from other life forms before us. The connectivity. Is that helping?
Yeah, I think I'm following, because it would be the no new thoughts thing. Just like in creation, there's no new thing, right? Like there's just, we don't see, a sun popping from nothing, or a person popping on the earth from nothing, from not pre-existing things. Well, the thoughts and the consciousness is what he's saying. It would follow this same pattern.
I think it's that no one's starting from scratch, right? You have a genetic makeup that it helps inform you and gives you a leg up, but as well you have knowledge, accumulated knowledge of cultures and whatnot that you're leveraging to then operate. So somebody else can go. I have more to say to that, but I want to think how I want to put it first.
Right, and so I want to. This is like another misconception that's pretty common. So the competition for resources. So again, with the pando tree, we have the leaves to absorb. It's kind of like us eating. We need a certain amount of light, basically. The larger or more complex a form of our consciousness or life becomes, the more resources it requires. It's like the tree cutting off the resources from the other trees around it. But even the trees that get cut off, they end up going back to the system and becoming the food for that larger organism. So they just become part of that consciousness in a roundabout way.
That language doesn't make sense to me. It becomes part of that consciousness in a different way.
Oh, okay, so like,
it sounds Jungian.
I'm back to looking at things from particles. Right. Everything is like, rather than looking at the body as one thing, I look at the body as many things working together. A theory called endosymbiosis is part of this as well. I got a good video I can show you guys if you want that link later.
Maybe it would help if you tell us what consciousness, like when you say consciousness like that, what, are you meaning something a little different than my individual consciousness? And maybe you could explain what you mean by consciousness.
Right. Okay. So I was going to explain earlier what I was talking about with emergent consciousness. So at a certain level of the game, I've got it separated into 7 tiers. It's going from 0 to 6, and just roughly 0 is the precursor of memory. It's like a lot of the structural geometry and the chemicals, magnetite, the smaller bits and pieces of our universe, and then like bacteria, fungus, viruses. That's tier 1. Tier 2 is like hive creatures like ants and bees. That's like another level of consciousness. And then as it increases in complexity and more masses of microbiology start working together in more complex fashions, this emergent property occurs where the ability to perceive, think, and sense your environment is increased. And so then tier 3 is like your dog, your cat, your cow. Tier 4 is average humans, maybe monkeys even teeter on the brink of tier 4, maybe whales, dolphins, that's like up for debate. Then we start to identify an increase in complexity gradually, which we distinguish with intelligence currently, but I look at it more as increase in complexity and divergence of our species, even though I don't really look at it as different species. But you get like tier 5, and you have people manipulating. So okay, the classification system, I recommend you guys watch the series if you're at all curious. It's a lot easier to take in that way. But when we reach tier 4, as regular humans, basically, we start usurping other forms of biology to save calories. It's like a manipulation. And we start manifesting intention into reality through invention. Like we build houses, right? That's why I put monkeys in tier 3, because they don't build houses. They do use some tools a little bit, but they're not really manifesting intention. So, and then tier 4, we'll take a cow, we'll usurp the cow's entire life to save us calories. Well, tier 5.
So are these tiers of? Are you trying to say that these are tiers of consciousness?
Mm-hmm. I created this theory for the purpose of behavioral psychology, diagnosis, and applications, because I realized.
Psychologist?
I realized that.
Wait, are you a behavioral psychologist?
I have no degree whatsoever.
So you created this for something you're not trained in?
I am. I just didn't go to school for it. I watched college lectures for psychology. I was raised by a psychologist. I've been doing it for a very long time, and I'm an autodidact.
That doesn't make me a nurse.
So okay, but hold on. Let me.
You saying that because I didn't go to school doesn't make me a psychologist doesn't mean that I'm not a psychologist.
I think we can. Let's
what it means.
Exactly what
that's that. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm really sorry. Right, okay, I've been listening and I've not got much to say because I'm confused as fuck. I'm not going to lie to you. But a psychologist, to call yourself a psychologist, you have to A, have a degree in psychology, and B, be a member of a recognised psychology board. That's not the right term. So there's British psychology, the American psychology, something or other institute. So you can't be a psychologist because you don't fit into the definition of what a psychologist is.
Okay. I use psychology. Is that better?
We all use psychology.
Okay. Whatever. If you guys don't want to acknowledge that, whatever, I can use it. You don't want to call me a psychologist. That's fine. I don't really care. I don't know what I am. I have no idea. Adam, it's an arbitrary label. Psychologist is an arbitrary label. Psychology is out of philosophy.
But it's not. But they're not arbitrary.
Allow me 1 second. If you don't have credentials that are, please let me finish. If you don't have the credentials that are recognized for the topic that you're addressing, how much weight should we give any theory that you have?
I would say that examining the theory would be the first step, and then that is something that you can decide for yourself once you examine the theory, and you can judge it by the value of the theory and how I apply it, rather than whether or not I have a college degree. So
And
I may not be an expert on anything, but I do understand psychology, and I do use it, and I do it, whether I have a degree or not.
How do you use psychology? I have a degree in psychology. I manage a laboratory of experimental psychology. How do you use psychology?
Well, again, I used it. I did research where I studied people by asking them questions.
If you're going to say that you do research, you're undermining the fact that I manage a lab that actually does research.
Well, I'm sorry.
I know that the research that you did is as valid that
I apologize that I went and did research without the authoritarian's consent, and I did it without help.
What's authoritarian about science? It's a meritocracy. What merit do you have?
Right. Well, I can't prove to you.
Science doesn't prove anything. I want you to justify why I should give you merit.
You know, if I don't finish the sentence and you assume that you know what I'm going to say, and then you insert what you think I'm going to say,
for 5 minutes uninterrupted.
You're building a straw man.
Tighten it up. There's no straw man. You admitted something that I'm challenging you on.
Okay.
It's not a straw man.
Right, and I thought we moved past it because I conceded that I'm not a psychologist by you guys' definition.
Can I jump in here, because I don't want this to become the hang of debating your credentials. So I think the thing that I took issue with, which we tried to move past it, but then you said that the labels are arbitrary, and they're not arbitrary. They actually mean something, right? Like that was a little bit of my point about that you're Adam. It's not an arbitrary label. It's something I used to identify you versus, say, Chris. And the labels regarding your credentials matter in terms of giving you benefit of the doubt that you know what you're talking about, that you've actually done the research. I don't have to spend quite as much time exhausting myself because the credentials allow me to forego some of that. Of course, we want to look at your theory. We want to talk about that. So what I was going to say earlier, if you guys don't mind moving on, is it seems to me like you're talking about tiers of consciousness, or you're trying to link these things together in some way in terms of that as the speciation moves on, that there's like a collective that's being formed or something. And I guess my point with that would be that my issue with that would be that I feel like it's equivocating on consciousness a little bit, in that, or a lot, I should say, in that my consciousness is very personal to me. It's not something shared with someone else in the sense that they can experience what I'm experiencing, or that they have the awareness that I have. I can share it with them by running it through their senses, essentially. Like that's what happens when we have books and knowledge that's accumulated over culture, is it's actually something that's being recorded as shorthand, but somebody still has to digest it for it to work its way into their consciousness. So as much as we want to say that there's a collective consciousness, there's really just a bunch of individual bits, and then you have shorthand work, which may not be justified or not, right? Like we have a lot of knowledge that we toss out because in fact it was wrong. It wasn't knowledge. We thought it was knowledge. So we're doing kind of this process of recording to continue to give the next generation something to work from. And in that sense, we could say that there's a bit of a progression there, but it's an equivocation to call that a collective consciousness or a larger consciousness. It doesn't seem to suit the word.
I didn't even finish describing what I call emergent consciousness.
I think maybe you had to shortcut after we get the idea of the tiers to go to more of a succinct, here's a concept, let's talk about this, or like you have to find a way for us to frame it in a way where we can have actually a conversation about it, right?
Yeah,
right. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt. Xbox asked the question before, can you define consciousness? And rather than define consciousness, you went on to talk about the tiers of consciousness. Now, before you talk about the tiers of consciousness, we have to understand what your understanding of consciousness is, so that then we can understand what you mean by tiers of consciousness. So I think that Bert is exactly right. It stops the conversation because you're not defining your understanding of consciousness. So
yeah, even if we have a different understanding of consciousness, at least we'll know what you're talking about. Like, we're not gonna argue you're using the wrong definition or anything, but we just need an understanding of what you actually mean.
Yeah, I slipped it in there, but I guess I didn't emphasize enough that was my answer. So what I define consciousness as is the ability to process and be aware of your environment, process the information. That's basically awareness, consciousness, same ballpark. And then the reasoning why emergent consciousness is important is because I perceive that at different stages of awareness, or under different perceptions, it affects your psychological state. And I'm proposing that the field of psychology needs to evolve, and that we need to compensate for the different levels of awareness that exist and how that affects people's psychological state. And I'm excuse my ignorance if it already does. You know, I've been doing this by myself for a very long time because I did not have economic resources. I was stuck in the woods of Kentucky. So it's where I was at. So,
no, and I think you only got the pushback was because you were speaking on authority and matter of fact.
Yes, and let me finish that statement. So what I'm saying about authority is that the authority is the entire education system, and like you go to school and you get your diploma, and that entire system is acting like a point of authority that says you know what you're talking about. We're the authority that says you know what you're talking about, and without us, nobody should listen to you at all because we are the authority and you don't have our backing, basically. That's what I was trying to say earlier.
The word authority. I'll be the first to admit that you can't spell dipshit without a PH or a D. Okay? So getting a degree in psychology doesn't mean anything. I've trained enough postdocs to know that having a degree, you know what they call somebody who graduates at the bottom of their class from graduate school? They call them doctor.
I do.
Doesn't mean know anything.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
But I think that you're misusing authority, because authority can be challenged, and the kind of authority that you're bestowing on licensing and credentialed universities can be challenged in a sphere of robust discussion. Authorities can't be.
I see. You again.
Language?
You got me. My English is crap. It's not my strong suit.
You're talking to somebody that mispronounces words every 5 words. So
yeah,
I'm not going to hold that against you.
I think visually, I'm not the greatest communicator. Doing the best I can. Apologies.
No,
We're all there.
Yeah. We're good. It's. I think we want to have a conversation about it. So I think that it's not that we're looking to trash your things. I think we want to understand and be able to, and we might trash it through argument, but we don't want to I don't want to prejudge it, right? So.
No, it's helping.
Right.
If I'm using a word incorrectly and you guys have to teach me how to use a word properly, then that's just progress.
So can we go back to you talked about emergent consciousness. What would be an example? Is that the tier level that you're talking about? Is that what you would call emergent consciousness? Or what? Because when I think of emergent consciousness, I think of emergence of consciousness, that mental states occur at a certain point in development. But when you're talking about emergent consciousness, I get the sense you're talking about something a bit bigger.
No, like what you're talking about is what I'm talking about. That's at a certain stage of the game. And the reason why I say emergent consciousness, I mean, again, I could be using, there might be better words to describe all of this, and that's great if you guys know the words. So the universe, as far as we can tell, evolutionarily speaking, there was a certain point when it didn't have what we are doing right now, or at least to our knowledge. Somewhere else in the universe, it can happen, whatever. But at least whatever here on Earth, at some point, presumably, there was not this level of, processing the environment, awareness, communications, passing on of knowledge, manifesting invention. That's an emergent property. So
yeah, I think Bert was on top of it, and he said the mental states, right? Like I wouldn't attribute mental states to a bacteria. I would
Are
say
you
it's
positive?
sensing the environment around it. It is interacting with it and sensing it, but it's not having mental states about its environment.
No. In my theory, in my videos right now, I totally clarify what you're saying, and I don't call bacteria aware, so to speak. Magnetotactic bacteria almost aware. I mean, they're aware of a magnetic field, sort of, but I don't think they have a central nervous system, a brain. They don't have any processing of it, so I don't really label them as consciousness. They are part of what builds up to emergent consciousness, and this is why I was talking about the theory of endosymbiosis, because like mitochondria are closely genetically related pretty much to bacteria. They might as well be a bacteria, and they are the engines for our cells, right? So right there, that's a symbiosis at a cellular level between us and a microorganism, basically. And for every cell in the body, there's like 10 bacteria. You got the microflora in your gut that tells you what you're hungry for. I mean, all these things. You look at the individual body, you could break it down and say that it's a mass of microbiological symbiosis. And then if you combine all of that, it's all being supported by the ecosystem or by the biosphere. And then the biosphere is being supported by the universe, the stars, the planet, right? So you end up with all things allowing for this to happen, and what we are doing right now is the emergent consciousness.
That's the bit that little bit that we're doing the emergent. I think each individual has consciousness. When it becomes, I completely understand the systems level view of things, that this is a collective orchestration that all of the parts contribute to, but all the parts are not aware or conscious, or they contribute to my consciousness and your consciousness, but our consciousnesses are distinct. Our consci are distinct. The conch.
Like that
Past the conch.
And we're back to like I was saying before, I look at everything as floating possibilities of varying probability. So is individualism an axiomatic truth of our state of existence? That is a possibility that has value, right?
Yeah. I think we take that on board as what I call properly basic beliefs. I think I take that on board as an innate thing, that I am an individual and that I exist. Now, whether that's actually true, it is a different question.
And when you say you're an individual, we're talking about a collection, a continuum of mental states.
Right. Yeah, I'm not talking about my matter. I'm not talking about the molecules. It's the mental states, the experience.
Right. Which you are part of your environment, and as you move through your environment, we're changing shape, we're changing form, we're replacing cells. It's affecting our brains, which are not individual things, but yet many smaller things working in tandem. And there's another theory, all matter and energy is like a photon traveling through space, like being fired out of a flashlight analogy. So we are like that, and we're this ever-transmuting mass of matter and energy that is in this structural geometry state that allows for this expression, this particular state of our reality. Now, are we an individual? Maybe. Are we a mass of microbiological symbiotic consciousness, part of a superorganism? That's another possibility. Were we created by a god?
Wait, but that's not a possibility. The microbe orchestration awareness.
Here it is.
Why?
When you rub your fingers together, right? Electromagnetic forces are building up charge in between all of the molecules, the atoms that are in your skin, and then there is whatever, all the matter in the cells and all the individual things, tinier things, that make up this area. And then it's communicating that pressure buildup from the magnetism, electromagnetic forces, to the rest of your central nervous system. And then that's going and being processed by a whole bunch of other smaller things. And then you can communicate that to the rest of the superorganism, as if the hair on the arm now has the ability to talk to the hair in the butt. And the butt can tell the hair on the arm what the butt smells like. Also, empathy.
But it can't, right?
Well, the hair can't, but we're not hair. Again, that's an analogy.
That's not conscious awareness, though. That is just simply the various things you're talking about are chemical interactions and electromagnetic impulses and whatnot. But it's not my. It can have an impact on my awareness or on my mental states, but it's not a constituent member of my mental states. Right?
Well, what happens?
It's not my consciousness.
It's part of what?
If I chop off my finger, all of a sudden, have I lost part of my consciousness?
Well, in a way, you have.
No, I've lost the ability to have my consciousness impacted by that, and I have my consciousness contemplates it, but it isn't my consciousness, right?
Right. I suppose you could just chop your entire body off, and you're still going to have your head, but either way, as long as you still have any senses of the environment whatsoever, whether it be, from the hair being blown by the wind or, the sun on your face, those things are going to contribute to what your consciousness is, what your awareness is.
No, okay, so let's see if you have your
brain is part of everything.
I think you're mixing up experience. You're mixing up experience there with consciousness, right?
But if you have phantom limb pain, if you're an amputee who has phantom limb pain, and you're experiencing something in your consciousness when there's actually no representation, there's no physical thing there actually stimulating it. It's being stimulated by other impulses or nearby activity or brain habits that cause the mental states to change in a way that you think that your hand's there. And you're feeling pain, or you're feeling, this for something that isn't there. That's all happening in your consciousness, and that's an emergent property of the brain, right? They contribute. My sensory organs allow me to extend in my space and perceive the world around me, but it is an input to my consciousness. It is not my consciousness itself.
Right. So, how do you want to define consciousness?
Well, what I want to do is I want to define consciousness as a continuum of mental states, and not use that word then to talk about my butt hair smelling my arm hair, or whichever way that's going. That's where the equivocation. That's where the equivocation occurs, and I don't know what you're talking about anymore.
Right. Ambiguity. Apologies.
My question was, are you making a differentiation between consciousness? Like what? See, I'm totally unclear on where consciousness fits in the picture in any articulable way, and so I'm really questioning your use of this collective consciousness, because in my picture it's like a million billion windows. On kind of what is, but not a collective awareness.
So we are not to the point yet of a collective, combined, fully connected consciousness.
I remember what I was going to ask. Are you looking at a teleology here? Are you looking for this is a goal-directed process, like we're moving towards something?
Yes.
That's odd to me somehow. That does not fit in with the way I see it.
It's just a possibility again. So
yeah, I just wanted to say that in some ways we were on the same page, but in that way I don't
think we are.
So
anyway, that's okay though.
We have combined knowledge pools. We share genetic memory. We're genetically related to pretty much everything on the planet, maybe aside from arsenic-based life, which I don't know. I'd have to do research. But no, we're genetically related to the grass in your yard, bananas, all the complex life forms pretty closely, each other very, very closely. That's a big chunk of memory that we share. And so part of my theory with emergent consciousness is precursor is memory. And whatever, genetic memory is, partly it's like structural geometry, and I don't understand everything about genetics.
Now, when you say that, are you meaning something like instincts? Like we've built in instincts that aren't necessarily genetic?
No, I'm thinking more along the lines of like the code that triggers certain expressions of the phenotype to be triggered. So that the actual shape is
not genetic. You're saying something other than genetic.
Before genetics, it is emergent properties and combination of chemicals, water, magnetite, all working together to allow for microbiology to occur, and then symbiosis between them to work together and create the first neural networks.
But this is like hydrogen and oxygen coming together, right? Neither one of these are liquid, but put together, liquid is an emergent property of it, I guess, of how you're saying, and you would put that on. But these two don't have some kind of memory of experience that. I'm not sure how you relate that when you jump to all of us now with how we're conscious now have some sort of symbiotic relationship that is determined by the past.
Right. And then once we have the ability for memory, and we have the ability to pass on those memories from generation to generation, then we have the combined knowledge pool, which is a step towards being a combined consciousness. We're not fully combined. I would say that the internet and neural nets, which they already have, like we will have it probably in our lifetime, be able to connect to the internet with our brains, connect to each other, share images, that sort of thing. Once that occurs, that will be where we reach tier 7. Which
I think I got what you're saying. You're talking about mental evolution or consciousness evolution.
Yeah.
It's talking about knowledge, I think.
Right. Well, he's saying that we are moving towards combining to one entity of consciousness.
That's what's odd.
But this would be on a mental level, not on a physical level. Maybe our physical bodies die off and just the mental exists. Not saying that he's saying that, but that draws you a picture of what we're talking about. We imagine the Earth right now with individual mental dots everywhere, and with the internet and our history, these have some sort of a connection to each other of passing on history and moving towards a state of all these little dots becoming one dot.
Go ahead, Lydia.
I look at us as forming a membrane.
I want to hear from Lydia on this.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm just. Are you positing some sort of dualism where, or idealism? Is it? I'm not really jiving with this where this has ended up. But I don't exactly know where to, as Maute put it, like sink my teeth in, because I don't quite get where you're going. And I think the issue may be trying to say it all at once.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Why make YouTube?
I guess you can answer that on hers, Beyond. Do you see the mental and the physical as two separate things?
No.
Do you know what idealism is?
Yes.
Okay. It would be, for anybody out there that doesn't, it would basically, the matter in the universe is mental matter. It's not physical matter.
I get the collective database concept of that you have all of these people having experiences. They're taking in data, and we'll be, potentially feeding data across to each other, such that there's a big a net essentially of experience going on. But it's not recording. It's not recording our consciousness, right? It's actually gleaning information from the world through, let's say, through cameras or other data that can be then sifted and stored electronically. But we are still conscious beings with mental states, right? Like, it still has to find its way in through our perceptions, right, or through our perceptive faculties, right? It doesn't. The walls don't come down all of a sudden with technology, where it's just jamming this stuff in, unless you're positing that there's going to be on-the-fly building of mental matter in a way where it brings about a new kind of consciousness, or that's my problem here, is that it's a little soft. It's a lot soft in terms of the science, but it's a little it feels like we're equivocating on terms and ending up with just kind of this potpourri of consciousness under one label, when in fact we're actually talking about different things. We're talking about beliefs that have been recorded as data that then can be taken in and processed by individuals. Anyway,
it's a matter of perspective, and we in the Western world have been excessively compartmentalizing every facet of our reality for a very long time, and that's how we understand it better, by breaking it down. But that doesn't.
That's a different thing, though. So like I said, I can wrap my head around it. I empathize with this desire to try to get us to think bigger about things, and not be so self-centered in our concept of ourselves, but to see it as as these bigger pieces. That's a little bit what we were talking about earlier in the hangout. But I don't think it's just a Western way of thinking. I think there are biological facts concerning us that give us a common. That's why we have properly basic beliefs. Those are wired into our biology, right? That we have a way of processing the world as a human being, as an evolved human being. I have a way of forming propositions, beliefs, constative attitudes or propositional attitudes towards the world. Language forms along a certain way. And these are commonalities because of our biology, right? So I think that's why I have a hard time going, okay, well, this is just going to be this larger thing. It seems
so.
Sorry, go ahead.
So black holes, they churn the gases and other particulates and trigger the formation of stars. So without them, no stars. Without stars, no heavy elements, and no life, pretty much.
Okay.
So there's that.
You're talking about interdependency. That everything is needed for the whole. Is that what you're talking about?
And then
like all the pieces, all the bits are necessary. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and then we have the ecosystem that is part of the universe and dependent upon the stars and the black holes, right? So we have all this symbiosis going on in the ecosystem, and it is a secular system, and that's why I was talking about time earlier and about how our lives are actually really short. And I'd prefer to perceive our entire state of existence as a fart in a tornado, and we're like a brain cell living and dying, firing off and contributing to the mass processing, like Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, the Earth is a computer trying to process the ultimate question type thing. And like we die, we go back to the system, we become the food, our particles become the cells again of the future forms of consciousness. Everything we processed here and we perpetuate into the minds of the whole, of whatever the community, the tribe, whatever you want to look at it, we then can reabsorb that in the future forms of awareness, consciousness, whatever you want to call it.
Adam, yeah. I think everybody's on board with that. I think everybody gets that. Carl Sagan said that we're all star stuff, right? I think we all get the point that there's an interdependence in the universe, such that were anything different, you and I would be different, or we wouldn't be here, or that there's a large orchestration going on that we kind of excise ourselves, or we see ourselves as being outside of it. That the universe is going on, and then there's us, and we don't really see ourselves as integrated in and dependent, like that we are integrated into the fabric of the whole thing, and we're part of it. We're not separate. And that's, I think, a really worthwhile endeavor, bringing awareness and having people's shift in terms of how they think about themselves. Like, obviously, like, I'm of the opinion that religion would be very different, right, if we had some of that perspective. But the problem I have is then when we start to talk about consciousness and awareness and the collective in the Borg sense. I think Holy Spackle mentioned the Borg, but that's a little bit what that's kind of gets to sound like. And I don't think that I'm not there with you on that. Like, I don't really see it.
Maute put it out a little bit earlier that it's a Jungian style of a belief, right? Like the Jung of the collective consciousness.
Because once you kind of divorce, once the equivocations occur and you're starting to talk about things that we can put our finger on and talking about them in a generalized way that actually fails to consider actually what it is we're talking about, and it starts talking about like things, well, then you're no longer talking about the thing, and it becomes that's when it starts getting a bit tricky.
It's a struggle. Lateral concepts, the complexity of our reality, it's tough. And so, are we going to get the right answer every time? Probably not. Even if we figured out that individualism was true now, or that really it's a collective consciousness, or some mix of them, whatever possibility we decided was status quo driven fact of the day, we're likely just going to find out it's wrong when we learn something new anyway. So here's a perspective as well, is if you're going to choose a perception of reality when you don't know what reality is, it makes more sense to choose a perception of reality that makes healthy things happen rather than harmful things happen. And so
I don't think we need to know. We were just talking about this the other day. I don't think we actually need to know what reality is to navigate through it. We have our maps, and that's what we have. So whatever can not clash with that is how our beliefs get formed, or should.
The map thing is important to important to articulate. As the same impulse that gets us to tell stories is the one that gets us to make maps. It's necessary for our survival. But where we fall apart, I was thinking about this the other day with Mr. Jadlow, with his inability to distinguish the map and the place. I think it's a mistake to construct a new story. I think, and that's my only comment for Adam, is that, like, be careful, because you're telling a story. Even if you think it's the right story and it's a new story and it breaks all the other stories, but just watch out for the tendency to write a new mythology for yourself.
Yeah, go back to your Tao thing. When you think you have the truth, you don't.
And again, I've said this a bunch of times now, floating possibilities, having different probabilities. Also, I don't think that it's my thought. I don't think it's an original thought. I think it's something that's always been here, and I am just channeling the knowledge and processing it and then spitting out the answer like a calculator, basically. And there is transpersonal psychology, which I made the theory for emergent consciousness, and I was making the series, and I was telling a friend about it, and she's like, hey, have you heard of transpersonal psychology? Right in the middle of my video, I had to, like, make this little address transpersonal psychology bit in the intro even. So this tier system, basically, tiers of awareness, have been around for a while, but transpersonal psychology is using it to justify spiritualism, and use to make it so that spiritual enlightenment is not insanity, and we have to approach people who are spiritually enlightened with different psychology. And so I kind of reinvented that a little bit, but it's pretty similar. except I'm using scientific terminology and more solidifications. Again, it's a work in progress as well.
Let me make a point. I would caution, like you talked about being a calculator, and that this thing's been out there, but you're merely just spitting it out, or you're the one revealing it. That's a consequence. That would be a consequence of this position that I think would be unhealthy. That would be dangerous. That's an attitude a lot of people could take. Right. That's an attitude that a lot of people could take, and there would be a that would some seemingly justify that revelation style. It would. There's a lot of bad calculators
out there. Holy Spirit. It's the equivalent of the Holy Spirit speaking through me. Yeah.
Right, and I don't think you meant it quite so literally, but I do think that you do see it as it does kind of it does. It is consistent with the view that you're putting forward of of these things as existing forms, or as inevitable forms, or as these inevitable tiers, or that makes sense.
So, there are different levels of awareness. I mean, you go to school and you learn a bunch of things. You are aware of more than other portions of our consciousness. So there are differences in that regard. So I think it's helpful to have an outline, especially when it comes to understanding our state of existence and understanding how to apply, perception and psychology for our different forms and states. So I do think it's important to have that, but at the same time, I try to reiterate this, that we need to understand that we are still all part of the same thing and on this ride together. That is, I guess, a bit idealistic, but realistically, we are equal in the big picture, even though we have certain skills that are better than others. Like if you're a role-playing character, you sign your stats to different places, but you're all still equal to the team. Guy who empties my garbage is valuable the same, because I'd be out there emptying my garbage and not thinking about things. So without him, none of this happens. And then again, without all the thoughts that have ever been thought and all the scientists that have ever done what they've done, none of this is possible. So none of this is mine. Also, I used Xbox Live, and like what we're doing right now, I did this for years, building these concepts. These concepts are not mine. They are built from this, what we're doing right now, and they're still being built.
Yeah, most of us here, I don't think, would, like I said, we're even trying to attack beliefs. For one, we need to understand it to even examine it. But I'm not here to attack people on their beliefs. We can talk about it. I can show where reasoning is off, and even maybe help you understand where you're at.
I would caution about the notion that you just simply collected this data and are putting it back forward, right? Like you are interpreting the data and whatever you collected, and you're putting it out in a form that makes sense to you. So it is your ideas. These aren't just simply your observations. These are the observations you took and applied through the concepts that you hold, and are articulating them back to us. So I mean, these are your beliefs if you're collecting the data and you're trying to come to conclusions about them, or you're trying to represent them. What you found is meaningful or worthwhile, as distant as you try to be about it, by your having actually even selected out data, you have filtered it. You have represented it.
Right. You've put your unique part on it, so it would be your ideas. That's the way, the internet works. That's the way, if you look back in philosophy, you'll find a lot of recycled things put in a new light that shed it on it. And we attribute it to the person that shed the new light on it, not the history of all these collections of ideas, right? So you do have a unique, not spin on it, I would say that, but you have a unique idea and concept of it.
Every time I share it with someone or a group of people, like we're doing right now, they all bring something to the table that changes the concept in different ways. And so, in that way as well, it's not mine, because I take your feedback and then I apply it to any problems that may exist. So we cooperatively are forming the idea, even still, the wave of consciousness. And then again, I didn't create the idea of psychology. I didn't create the idea of species. I didn't create the idea of spiritualism and enlightenment. All of these things are created by the whole, or whatever. You want to say other individuals created it. I mean, it's whatever. That's possibility as well. I don't say that this is the way it is or it's that way. I say that there's numerous possibilities. And I'm observing a phenomenon that I think is occurring, and it's all built on what everyone else thinks.
So
I don't even like speciesism. If I had it my way, we wouldn't even have all the compartmentalizations of species. We would just say that we're the life of Earth, and there's slightly different phenotype expressions of that same life. But it's useful.
But you're getting a lot of feedback here, and you're going to be choosing to ignore some and choosing to take on board others, right? So you are adjudicating you're making the decisions about what are in your your concepts are shaped by you. You are and your experience hearing these things and your dispositions and your attitudes towards the concepts you currently hold and what you can fit in, what coheres or fits into the model that you currently have, and what doesn't jive and you think is wrong. So I think that's my problem, is that I completely agree with you that we bounce ideas off of each other and we are in a causal relationship with each other such that our knowledge is impacted, right? Our beliefs are our beliefs are impacted, and our dispositions and attitudes we're exposed to different ideas from other people and we find them persuasive, and there's a sifting that goes on and a molding and a forming, and coherence is my mind's trying to build coherence right now as I'm hearing from you these ideas, and I'm integrating some in, I'm rejecting others, I'm spitting others back to you. So there's this complex thing going on, but ultimately it's you, right? Like ultimately you are making videos and you're making them based on your interpretation of what's happened today, how you took the beliefs on board, what your attitudes were beforehand that caused you to take on some and not others. And so I think that's the distancing, or the trying to it's not maybe distancing, maybe it's distancing through embracing this notion of everybody's contributing to this. That's a little dangerous, I think. You have to recognize that you're liable. You are the one that's actually asserting positions, right? You're not taking other people's representations. You have your own concepts. Even you talked about spiritualism and speciesism, species and other larger structures. The concepts that you have in your head for those things are not my concepts, right? Like I have a different notion of those things based on my experiences. Our concepts are slightly different.
You're right on that point, Bert. That's exactly where you start the questioning, right? Like you don't ever not question your foundations or things you take for granted, the things you're filtering it through. I don't know how to say that without a doubt.
It just feels a little dangerous to me linking it to the larger structure, because all of a sudden it becomes something that somehow has some validation or justification to it, simply because it's emergent or something. But it's not emergent. You're building coherence and you're forming the concepts, and it's your experience, and it could be wrong. Like obviously people have mental breakdowns and have irrational faculties going on, and they're not taking in larger.
I'm proposing a theory. I didn't say that it was a fact. I'm not having a breakdown. It's just an idea that I'm sharing with the world. And I accept that there's a responsibility with sharing that theory. Also, I don't disregard that individualism is valid theory to explain our state. Everything you've said is agreeable. Like, possibilities are floating. I don't argue these things against each other. I consider them all at the same time. I explain all of this too in my videos, by the way. And I'm not emotionally invested in the concepts. If they're wrong, right? And that's progress. Like was the quote? Edison said something about finding, he didn't fail. He found 10,000 things that didn't work, or succeeded at finding 10,000 things that didn't work. That's the way I kind of look at it as well. So it's like, whatever, if I produced an idea, channeled out of a bunch of puzzle pieces, if the world doesn't want to accept it, they want to say that it's wrong, then it becomes the status quo-driven wrong answer of the day, and the world moves on, and it learned what it could. Now, I've considered the possibilities of what could happen if people adopt this type of thinking, and for the most part, I see it being mostly positive or helpful, because we will be thinking not completely not as individuals, but we'll be thinking more for the group and a little bit more expanded in our consciousness about, or our awareness of everything and the connectivity, and that is likely going to help. It's going to increase our empathy, bring us a step closer to the tribalism that we lost so long ago. Whereas individualism is just this continuation of extreme separation from each other, from the environment, and that, I don't see that as being really that healthy. You know, and like original thoughts, whatever, once in a while maybe an original thought happens as an emergent phenomenon. But for the most part, we are just processing that information again. Like Xbox said a while back, that it's all here already. Like all the information in our reality is already here. The only new information that pops up is when we get a new structural geometry, which is like adding another side to the dice that we roll.
When I think that's what, whenever we're saying consciousness, that's what we're talking about, is the mental awareness of about things, right? So the things are there, we discover them.
Yeah,
and we can be mentally aware of them, I don't know how else to say that, about things, like about me, about reality. When we're talking conscious, we're talking about that kind of mental state. And I know you're using the word a little different there, and I think Bert was pointing that out, that you filter it through your construction of what's going on. And I think that does lead all the way back to our conversations with Lydia, that you build a model of reality, that's your map, and you navigate through it. Whether it's actually the case is irrelevant at that stage. You're just interacting with reality if reality's there.
Yeah, I want to clarify as well. I wasn't trying to say that you were unstable or anything. I was using that as an example of someone whose belief forming isn't resulting in true beliefs. And you should certainly you should make videos, and you should put your thoughts out there and in the public sphere, and have them scrutinized and applauded or rejected or revised or whatever. And it's more, anything that I've said here has been a caution on the amenability to revision and the confidence with which you put them out there. It's a lot to take in, and I think I'm simply saying I guess it's the level of confidence especially when you're out there on your own or in a small group forming beliefs. There's a value to that. There's also there's a liability to that, right? You can end up in that's not always and so I think you've been perfectly open to hearing feedback here and talking about it, and so I don't want you to get the wrong message from me. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm merely cautioning against.
Lydia put it out there about putting armor up around you. You become closed-minded when you think you have the right view, and you've got to caution and rail against that, because some of these views can start matching your experiences so well and be so wrong at the same time. But since they're matching up with your intuitions and your experience, you get locked into them, and you're dead set on them being this way. And there is a caution in being that closed-minded, whether you're religious or whether you're atheist, non-believer, no matter where you're at.
No, I'm scientific about it. Again, I'm not connected to these things in that solidified way where, like, a lot of people, they'll say it's this versus that. I'm going to choose this. That's what I am doing. and then they use it to try to verify that they know what they are, which is like what I say everything is. And like I shared that quote a little bit ago. If you treat a theory like a belief, it becomes eerily similar to a religion. So I don't solidify and say that it is this way and that that's what I believe. I just say this is one of many possibilities that I'm currently considering in this very complex equation that we don't know the answer to. We don't even have all the puzzle pieces. I'm very rational when I approach new ideas. So I'm just being clear.
Yeah, sure. Can I ask you a question, Beyond? Is there anyone else that you know of that shares this theory that you are developing? Is there anyone that sort of has similar or the same theory?
Yes. I'm friends with August Hoffman. He is a professor of psychology who just published a book completely separate from me. We did not know each other, and we published or created, manifested extremely similar theories. Mm-hmm. And he verified to me the other day about this. And then there's transpersonal psychology, which has been around for a long time, but it's not very well known because it's pretty fucking woo-woo. And I mean, like a lot of theories, even this emergent consciousness theory is borderline woo-woo, fringe science. But if you watch the video, you'll see I'm basing it on enough tangible stuff that it's not totally like I wouldn't chalk it up to total woo-woo either. But I'm not the first person to play with this idea. Mm-hmm. And so this relates to the concept I call a product for enlightenment, or thought equations that yield the same answers. And it's like I found that I was coming up with some of the same philosophical principles, and then later on someone would say, oh, some philosopher said something like X, Y, and Z that's just like that. I'm like, oh, well, that makes sense. You have the same puzzle pieces, you have logic, you come up with some of the same answers. So it's like one of those things. Sorry, my answers are fucking prolixity. I have a problem.
No, you can still hear us. A lot of the shows like this and or interviews and try to be focused and have the conversation. But a lot of these hangouts on here are open and long, where you can be as long-winded as people will tolerate and go. So you're a good company.
The fact that you use the word prolixity moves you up a couple notches in my book. Excellent word.
Right. Prolixity.
All right, I think I'm going to, because I think we're over 3 hours now.
Yep.
I'm going to end the on air. This is a refreshing change over the last 3 hours from the usual bubble. It went in a couple of different directions we haven't been down before. Thank you to everyone for joining us, but especially Lydia. Thank you so much for... She's saying something, but it's muted.
I told you I'm a recovering Luddite. Leave me alone. No, thank you so much, Bert. It's practice on this whole talking to people thing.
Absolutely.
Which obviously I need more practice at, but you're helping. Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. So, and thank you, Xbox, for joining and keeping things moving, and always interesting to talk to you. And Helena, Dave, and Adam, thank you for joining. And Adam, thank you for enduring the grilling that we put you through. So it was interesting to hear your thoughts. I enjoyed it. Don't regret any of it. So thank you. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go off air. Everybody have a good weekend. Watch next week Helena's book club. We'll be doing the second episode on Fighting God by Silverman. So if you didn't see the first installment, it was a great discussion. It's on Helena's channel, and we'll see you there at this time next week. Take care.
Thanks so much.